Star. Give me the star. Give me the star. Give me the star. No, you're not going to give me the star. Don't smack my hand away from it. It's mine. Look. These little stars were part of a toy my husband cut apart for the dogs. She has yet to eat it. She loves it. Ready? Go. She wants to play fetch. Right as I decide I'm going to go live, she's decided that she wants to play. So I do apologize for not finishing the book last night. I was really in a lot of pain. I hadn't had my arthritis meds in a couple of days, and I was really, really bad off. So I could not sit in my chair. Today I'm a lot better. I have had my meds, so I am nice and comfortable. But we are going to just finish reading today. All of it. We're going to finish up. It's probably going to be a 2.5, 3 hour like yesterday. Maybe not as long, but we're still going to read it. We're going to see if anything else happens before the end of the book, considering what happened yesterday. Yesterday morning. We lost Maddie, and that really, really hit me hard. So we found out a lot of information. We found out that there is a connection between Mike and the Osters. So, because Kenny Oster's grandfather is his granduncle, his relative Mike's relative married Kenny's relative. So that's how they're related. So, now, this is where we left off. Again, I am Lady Rain. I am going to finish reading Bag of Bones, and then we're going to decide what to read next. Somebody suggested The Shining. I have read it already, but if you guys want, I will read it again, just for you guys. So, you let me know. If you want something else other than Stephen King, let me know. So, we left off with, only I was left, only I was blood, only I could do it, unless. I bolted back to the house as fast as I could, slipping and sliding my way along the soaked path, desperate to make sure she was all right. He's talking about Kyra. I didn't think Sara could hurt Kyra herself, no matter how much of that old-timer vibe she had to draw on. But what if I was wrong? What if I was wrong? Chapter 28. Kai lay fast asleep, just as I had left her, on her side, with her filthy little stuffed dog clenched in her jaw, under her jaw. It had put a smudge on her neck, but I hadn't the heart to take it away from her. Beyond her, and to the left, through the open bathroom door, I could hear the steady plink, plonk, plink of water falling from the faucet and into the tub. Cool air blew around me in a silky twist, caressing my cheeks, sending a not pleasurable shiver up my back. If she's going to eat it, she's going to eat it. In the living room, Bunter's bell gave a dim little shake. Water's still warm, sugar, Sara whispered. Be her friend, be her daddy. Go on now. Do what I want. Do what we both want. And I did want to, which had to be why Joe, at first, tried to keep me away from the TR and from Sara Laughs. Why she'd made a secret of her possible pregnancy as well. It was as if I had discovered a vampire inside me, a creature with no interest in what it thought of as talk show conscience and op-ed page morality. A part that wanted only to take Kai into the bathroom and dunk her into that tub of warm water and hold her under, catching the red-edged white ribbons shimmer the way, watching the red-edged white ribbons shimmer the way Carla Dean's white dress and red stockings had shimmered while the woods burned all around her and her father. A part of me would be more than glad to pay the last installment on that old bill. Dear God, I muttered, and wiped my face with a shaking hand. She knows so many tricks, and she's so fucking strong. The bathroom door tried to swing shut against me before I could go through, but I pushed it open against hardly any resistance. The medicine cabinet door banged back, and the glass shattered against the wall. The stuff inside flew out at me, but it wasn't a very dangerous attack. This time, most of the missiles consisted of toothpaste tubes, toothbrushes, plastic bottles, and a few old Vicks inhalers. Faint, very faint. I could hear her shouting in frustration as I yanked the plug at the bottom of the tub and let the water start gurgling out. There had been enough drowning on the TR for 1 century, by God. And yet, for a moment, I felt an incredibly strong urge to put the plug back in while the water was still deep enough to do the job. Instead, I tore it off its chain and threw it down the hall. The medicine cabinet door clapped shut again, and the rest of the glass fell out. "How many have you had?" I asked her. "How many besides Carla Dean and Carrie Oster and Arkai? 2, 3, 5? How many do you need before you can rest?" "All of them," the answer shot back. It wasn't just Sarah's voice either. It was my own as well. She'd gotten into me, had snuck in by way of basement like a burglar. And already I was thinking that even if the tub was empty and the water pump temporarily dead, there was always the lake. "All of them," the voice cried again. "All of them, sugar." Of course, all of them would do. Until then, there would be no rest for Sara Laughs. "I'll help you to rest," I said. "That I promise." The rest of the water swirled away, but there was always the lake. Always the lake if I changed my mind. I left the bathroom and looked in on Kai again. She hadn't moved. The sensation that Sara was in here with me had gone. Bunter's bell was quiet. And yet I felt uneasy, unwilling to leave her alone. I had to, though, if I was to finish my work. And I would do well not to linger. County and state cops would be along eventually, storm or no storm, down trees or no down trees. Yes, but I stepped into the hall and looked uneasily around. Thunder boomed, but it was losing some of its urgency. So was the wind. What wasn't fading was the sense of something watching me, something that was not Sara. I stood where I was for a moment or two longer, trying to tell myself it was just the sizzle of my overcooked nerves, then walked down the hall to the entry. I opened the door to the stoop, then looked around again sharply, as if expecting to see someone or something lurking behind the far end of the bookcase. A shape, perhaps. Something that still wanted its dust catcher. But I was the only shape left. At least, in this part of the world. And the only movement I saw was ripple shadows thrown by the rain rolling down the windows. It was still coming down hard enough to re-drench me as I crossed my stoop to the driveway. Dad got it for lunch and there was just a small piece left, but I paid no attention. I had just been with a little girl when she drowned. Had damn near drowned myself not so long ago. And the rain wasn't going to stop me from doing what I had to do. I picked up the fallen branch, which had dented the roof of my car, tossed it aside, and opened the Chevy's rear door. The things I'd bought at Slips and Greens were still sitting on the back seat, still tucked into the cloth carry handle bag. Lila Pralks had given me. The trowel and the pruning knife were visible, but the third item was in the plastic sack. Want this one in a special bag? Leela had asked me. Always safe, never sorry. And later, as I was leaving, she had spoken of Kenny's dog Blueberry chasing seagulls and had given out a big, hearty laugh. Her eyes hadn't laughed, though. Maybe that's how you tell the Martians from the Earthlings. The Martians can never laugh with their eyes. I saw Romy and George's present lying on the front seat. The steno mask I'd at first mistaken for Devore's oxygen mask. The boys in the basement spoke up then, murmured at least, and I leaned over the seat to grab the mask by its elastic strap without the slightest idea of why I was doing so. I dropped it into the carry bag, slammed the car door, then started down the railroad tie steps to the lake. On the way, I paused to duck under the deck, where we'd always kept a few tools. There was no pick, but I grabbed the spade that looked up to a piece of grave digging. Then, for what I thought would be the last time, I followed the course of my dream down to the street. I didn't need Joe to show me the spot. The green lady had been pointing to it all along. Even had she not been, and even if Sarah Tidwell did not still stink to the heavens, I think I would have known. I think I would have been led there by my own haunted heart. There was a man standing between me and the place where the gray forehead of the rock guarded the path, and as I paused on the last railroad tie, he hailed me in a raspy voice that I knew all too well. "Say there, whore master, where's your whore?" He stood on the street in the pouring rain, but his cutter's outfit, green flannel pants, checked wool shirt, and his faded blue Union Army cap were dry, because the rain was falling through him rather than on him. He looked solid, but he was no more real than Sarah herself. I reminded myself of this as I stepped down onto the path to face him, but my heart continued to speed up, thudding in my chest like a padded hammer. He was dressed in Jared DeVore's clothes, but this wasn't Jared DeVore. This was Jared's great-grandson, Max. Who had begun his career with an act of sled theft and ended it in suicide, but not before arranging for the murder of his daughter-in-law, who'd had the temerity to refuse him what he had so dearly wanted. I started toward him, and he moved to the center of the path to block me. I could feel the cold baking off him. I was saying exactly what I mean.
Is the dishwasher clean?
Uh-huh.
You sure? 'Cause there was a bowl that wasn't.
There might be a few things that need to be rescrubbed. I am saying exactly what I mean, expressing what I remember as clearly as I can. I could feel the cold baking off him, and yes, it was Max DeVore, all right, but got up like a logger at a costume party, and looking the way he must have around the time his son Lance was born, old but hale. The sort of man younger men might well look up to, and now, as if he thought he called them, as if the thought had called them, I could see the rest shimmer into faint being behind him, standing in a line across the path. These were the ones who had been with Jared on the at the Freiburg Fair, and now I knew who some of them were. Fred Dean, of course, only 19 years old in '01. The drowning of his daughter still over 30 years away. And the one who had reminded me of myself was Harry Oster, the firstborn of my great-grandfather's sister. He would have been 16, barely old enough to raise a fuzz, but old enough to work in the woods with Jared. Old enough to shit in the same pot as Jared, to mistake Jared's poison for wisdom. One of the others twisted his head and squinted at the same time. I'd seen the tick before. Where? Then it came to me. In the Lakeview General. This young man was the late Royce Merrill's father. The others I didn't know, nor did I care to. "You ain't a-passin' by us," DeVore said. He held up both hands. "Don't even think about trying. Am I right, boys?" They murmured growling agreement, the sort you could hear coming from any present-day gang of headbangers or taggers, I imagine, but the voices were distant, actually more sad than menacing. There was some substance to the man in Jared DeVore's clothes, perhaps because in life he had been a man of enormous vitality, perhaps because he was so recently dead, but the others were little more than projected images. I started forward, moving into the old baking cold, moving into the smell of him, the same invalid odors which had surrounded him when I'd met him before. "Where do you think you're going?" he cried. "For a constitutional," I said. "And no law against it. The street's the place where good pups and vile dogs can walk side by side. You said so yourself." "You don't understand," Max Jared said. "You never will. You're not of that world, that of our world." I stopped, looking at him curiously. Time was short. I wanted to be done with this, but I had to know, and I thought DeVore was ready to tell me. "Make me understand," I said. "Convince me that any world was your world. I looked at him, then at the flickering, translucent figures behind him. Gauze flesh heaped on shining bones. Tell me what you did. It was all different then, Devore said. When you came down here, Noonan, you might walk all 3 miles north to Halo Bay and see only a dozen people on the street. After Labor Day, you might not see anyone at all. This side of the lake, you have to walk through the bushes that are growing up wild and around the fallen trees. There'll be even more of 'em after this storm. And even a dead fall or two, because nowadays the townfolk don't club together to keep it neat the way it used to be. But in our time, the woods were bigger then, Noonan. Distances were farther to go, and neighboring meant something. Life itself, often enough. Back then, this was a street. Can you see? I could. If I looked through the phantom shapes of Fred Dean and Harry Oster and the others, I could. They weren't just ghosts. They were shimmer glass windows. On another page, I saw a summer afternoon in the year of 1898, perhaps 1902, 1907, doesn't matter. This was a period when all time seems the same, as if time had stopped. This is the time the old-timers remember as a kind of golden age. And this so far as he's telling it is in italics. It is the land of ago, the kingdom of when I was a boy. The sun washes everything with the fine gold light of endless late June. The lake is as blue as a dream, netted with a billion sparkles of reflected light. And the street. It is as smoothly grassed as a lawn, and as broad as a boulevard. It is a boulevard, I see. A path where the community fully realizes itself. It is the main conduit of communication, the chief cable in a township crisscrossed with them. I'd felt the existence of these cables all along. Even when Joe was alive, I'd felt them under the surface. And here is their point of origin. Folks promenade on the street, all up and down the east side of Dark Spore Lake. They promenade in little groups, laughing and conversing under the cloud-stacked summer sky. And this is where the cables all begin. I look and realize how wrong I have been to think of them as Martians, as cruel and calculating aliens. East of their sunny... What are we talking about? Hold on. Okay. So, 0 today and 10 a month. Why is he buying this? Why do you need nitro? Sorry, it's my son. Gracious me. I apologize. My son writes me and I try to write him back right away. That way I understand what he's doing. Alright, I'll let him finish that. Folks promenade on the street. I still don't understand why you need the nitro or what this is for. But if there's no cost today, it's fine. Folks promenade on the street, all up and down the east side of Dark Square Lake. They promenade in little groups, laughing and conversing under a cloud-stacked summer sky. And this is where the cables all begin. He plays Marvel Snap on his phone. It's a game, and he collects all kinds of Marvel cards. I look up and realize how wrong I had been to think of them as Martians, as cruel and calculating aliens. East of their sunny promenade looms the darkness of the woods, glades and hollows, where any miserable thing may await, from the foot lopped off in the logging accident to the birth gone wrong and a young mother dead before the doctor can arrive from Castle Rock in his buggy. These are people with no electricity, no phones, no county rescue unit, no one to rely upon but each other, and a God some of them have already begun to mistrust. They live in the woods, and the shadows of the woods. But on fine summer afternoons, they come to the edge of the lake. They come to the street and look in each other's faces and laugh together. Then they are truly on the TR, in what I have come to think of as the zone. They are not Martians. They are little lives dwelling on the edge of the dark, that's all. I see summer people from Warrington's, the men dressed in white flannels, two women in long tennis dresses, still carrying their rackets, a fellow riding a tricycle with an enormous front wheel weaves shakily among them. The party of summer folk has stopped to talk with a group of young men from town. The fellows far from away want to know if they can play in the townies baseball game at Warrington's on Tuesday night. Ben Merrill, Royce's father-to-be, says, yeah, but we won't go easy on you just 'cause you're from New York. The young men laugh. So do the tennis girls. A little farther on, two boys are playing catch with a sort of raw homemade baseball that is known as a horsey. Beyond them is a convention of young mothers talking earnestly of their babies, all safely prammed and gathered in their own group. Men in overalls discuss weather and crops, politics and crops, taxes and crops. A teacher from the Consolidated High sits on the gray stone forehead I know so well, patiently tutoring a sullen boy who wants to be somewhere else and doing anything else. I think the boy will grow up to be Buddy Jellison's father. Horn broken, watch for finger, I think. All along the street, folks are fishing, and they are catching plenty. The lake fairly teems with bass and trout and pickerel. An artist, another summer fellow, judging from his smock and Nancy beret, has set up his easel and is painting the mountains while two ladies watch respectfully. A giggle of girls passes, whispering about boys and clothes and school. There is beauty here, and peace. Devore's right to say this is a world I never knew. It's beautiful, I said, pulling myself back with an effort. Yes, I see that. But what's your point? My point? Devore looked almost comically surprised. She thought she could walk there like anyone else. That's the fucking point. She thought she could walk there like a white gal. Her and her big teeth and her big tits and her snotty looks. She thought she was something special, but we thought her different. We taught her different. She tried to walk me down, and when she couldn't do that, she put her filthy hands on me and tumped me over. But that was all right. We taught her manners. Didn't we, boys? They growled agreement, but I thought some of them, young Harry Oster for one, looked sick. We taught her place, Devore said. We taught her she wasn't nothing but a nigger. This is the word he uses over and over again when they are in the woods that summer, the summer of 1901. The summer that Sarah and the Redtops became the musical act to see in this part of the world, she and her brother and their whole nigger family had been invited to Warrington's to play for the summer people. They have been fed on champagne and oysters, or so says Jared DeVore to his little school of devoted followers as they eat their own plain lunches of bread and meat and salted cucumbers out of lard buckets given to them by their mothers. None of the young men are married, although Orrin Peebles is engaged. Yet, it isn't her growing renown that upsets Jared DeVore. It isn't the fact that she has been to Warrington's. It don't cross his eyes none that she and her brother of hers have actually sat down and eaten with white folks, taken bread from the same bowl as them, with their black nigger fingers. The folks at Warrington's are Flatlanders, after all, and DeVore tells the silent, attentive men that he's heard that in places like New York and Chicago, white women sometimes even fuck black niggers. Nah, Harry Oster says, looking around nervously, as if he expected a few white women to come tripping through the woods way out here on Bowie Ridge. No white woman fucked a nigger, shoot a pickle. DeVore only gives him a look, the kind that says, when you're my age. Besides, he doesn't care what goes on in New York and Chicago. He saw all the flat land he wanted during the Civil War. And he will tell you, he never fought the war to free the damn slaves. They can keep slaves down there in the land of cotton until the end of eternity, as far as Jared DeVore is concerned. No, he fought in the war to teach those cracker son of a bitches south of Mason and Dixon that you don't pull out of the game just because you don't like some of the rules. He went down to scratch the scab off the end of old Johnny Reb's nose. Tried to leave the United States of America, they had. The Lord. No, he doesn't care about slaves, and he doesn't care about the land of cotton, and he doesn't care about black niggers who sing dirty songs and then get treated to champagne and oysters. Jared always says oysters in just that sarcastic way, in payment for their smut. He doesn't care about anything so long as they keep in their place and let him keep in his. But she won't do it. The uppity bitch will not do it. She has been warned to stay off the street. She will not listen. She goes anyway, walking along in her white dress, just as if there was a white person inside it, sometimes with her son, who has a black nigger American name and no daddy. His daddy probably just spent one night with his mummy in a haystack somewhere down Alabama, and now she walks around with the git of that just as bold as a brass monkey. She walks the street as if she has the right to be there, even though not a soul will talk to her. But that's not true, is it? I asked DeVore. That's not what really stuck in old great-granddaddy's craw, wasn't it? They did talk to her. They had a way about her. She had a way about her. That laugh, maybe. Men talked to her about crops, and the women showed off their babies. In fact, they gave her their babies to hold, and when she laughed down at them, they laughed back up at her. The girls asked her advice about boys. The boys, they just looked. But how they looked, huh? They filled up their eyes, and I expect most of them thought about her when they went out to the privy, and filled up their palms. DeVore glowered. He was aging in front of me, the lines drawing themselves deeper and deeper into his face. He was becoming the man who had knocked me into the lake because he couldn't bear to be crossed. And as he grew older, he began to fade. That was what Jared hated most of all, wasn't it? That they didn't turn away. She walked on the street, and no one treated her like a nigger. They treated her like a neighbor. I was in the zone, deeper in than I unconscious seemed to run like a buried river. I could drink from the river while I was in the zone. Could fill my mouth and throat and belly with its cool mineral taste. All that summer, Devore had talked to them. They were more than his crew. They were his boys. Fred and Harry and Ben and Orrin and George Brewster and Draper Finney, who would break his neck and drown the next summer trying to dive into Eads Quarry while he was drunk. Only it was a sort of accident that's kind of on purpose a lot between July of 1901 and August of 1902, because it was the only way he could sleep, the only way he could get the hand out of his mind, that hand sticking straight out of the water, clenching and unclenching until you wanted to scream. Won't it stop? Won't it ever stop doing that? All summer long, Jared Devore filled their ears with nigger bitch and uppity bitch. All summer long, he told them about their responsibility as men, their duty to keep the community pure. Get the dogs!
Outside!
Yep, take them out.
Outside.
Harley and Phoebe can go out.
Outside.
Go on, outside. Hold on, give me a sec. Yep, go on, outside. Outside. Come on. Hey, outside. Go. Let's go. Outside. Go.
Come on.
Outside.
Baby!
Go. Phoebe. Outside. You want to try to get them down the gate?
Mom, can I buy the...
What exactly are you buying? Because
It's
it
for
says
redeem.
nitro, but it doesn't tell me what are you redeeming.
A card of the Arrow Hawkeye.
So you're wanting to get this because you want Arrow Hawkeye, but it comes with nitro.
Yeah.
Do you know what nitro is?
I have no idea.
It's for Discord.
Oh.
So if you get a month free, do you get to cancel it after that month?
I don't know.
Maybe you should find out. Okay? Let Jess know the dogs are out back.
Okay.
I don't care, but you're going to cancel it because you don't need nitro. Hi! Yeah, we're just...
Choose?
What are you
Which one
talking about?
choose?
What are you talking about?
The monthly... Which one choose the payment?
Well, it's 0 today, right?
Yeah. The number...
Hold up. Claim your Nitro trial and Hawkeye variant gift pack with this special link. Open link.
Next.
You got 1 month of Nitro. Any eligible subscription credit will be applied until it runs out. Your subscription. So all we have to do is cancel it before then. Okay. Give me a second.
You just put...
I'm waiting for it to load up. So just give me a second. What is it doing?
Maybe it's loading or
I
something?
don't know. I'm trying to get it to autofill from browser. So you don't have it automatically on there anymore?
It's on Google, remember?
Google Pay?
I don't have that.
Okay, then help me out here because I'm confused.
Contact?
Put in your okay. Continue.
It doesn't work.
Why is this not working?
Maybe it needs...
I need you to do me a favor. The key is out on the counter.
Oh, where is it? Key? Car key? Oh, where's the car key?
I said it's on the counter.
Yeah. Oh, wait, counter?
Yes.
I found it. Let me get the
I need you to go out and get my wallet.
Okay, can I unlock it first?
Yeah. Anyway.
Got a big old doggy now. Big old doggy. Yeah, I got a big old doggy.
Give me a second. I need to find a little bit of information for my kiddo here real quick. My daughter was in an accident yesterday, so we are...
Excuse me, here you go.
Okay, here we go. Why do I have no password safe for that?
It's G.
Oh, that's why. Okay. No, Nick, hold on. I'm trying to figure out why I can't get into my passwords. Oh, that's why, because they're in a different area. Okay.
Yeah, how long did you say it would take for that letter to come in the mail, Mom?
A week.
Like 7 full days, or?
Probably a little more. You have to do this like right this moment, right?
Okay.
No, I'm asking you. Is that what you're telling me? You need to do it right this moment?
Moment of what?
You need to do it right this moment. Letting go. I don't know. What the heck? I just added a payment. Oh my good lord, we just did this.
It's bad that I had to stop.
Why is it not letting us use this? Fine, we'll do it that way.
I live in Rhode Island, the ancient Essers.
What the heck is... I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why it's not letting us do this. It's not making any sense. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. I don't get it.
Oh, you have to press this.
Okay.
Not to activate.
But you got your card.
Yeah,
You happy?
I'm happy.
Good. Okay. Now. Back to reading. Okay. Do you get offended easy? Okay, good.
Yeah.
All summer long, Jared DeVore filled their ears with nigger bitch and uppity bitch. All summer long, he told them about their responsibility as men, their duty to keep the community pure, and how they must see what others didn't and do what others wouldn't. It was a Sunday afternoon in August, a time when traffic along the street dropped steeply. Later on, by 5 or so, things would begin to pick up again. Nope. There we go. Out of there. Okay, here we go. And from 6 to sunset, the broad path along the lake would be thronged. But 3 in the afternoon was low tide. The Methodists were back in session over in Harlow for their afternoon song service. At Warrington's, the assembled company for vacationing Flatlanders was sitting down to a heavy mid-afternoon Sabbath meal of roast chicken or ham. All over the township, families were dressing their own Sunday dinners. Those who had already finished were snoozing through the heat of the day, in a hammock wherever possible. Sara liked this quiet time, loved it really. She had spent a great deal of life on carny midways and in smoky gin joints, shouting out her songs in order to be heard above the voices of red-faced, unruly drunks. And while part of her loved the excitement and unpredictability of that life, part of her loved the serenity of this one too. The peace of these walks. She wasn't getting any younger after all. She had a kid who had now left pert near all his babyhood behind him. On that particular Sunday, she must have thought the street was almost too quiet. She walked a mile south from the meadow without seeing a soul. Even Keto was gone by then, having stopped off to pick berries. It was as if the whole township were deserted. She knows there's an Eastern Star supper in Kashwacomic, of course. Has even contributed a mushroom pie to it because she had made friends of some of the Eastern Star ladies. They'll all be down there getting ready. What she doesn't know is that today is also dedication day for the new Grace Baptist Church, the first real church ever to be built on the TR. A slug of locals have gone, heathen as well as Baptists, faintly from the other side of the lake. She can hear the Methodists singing. The sound is sweet and faint and beautiful, distant and echo have turned every sour voice. She isn't aware of the men, most of them very young men, the kind who under ordinary circumstances dare only look at her from the corners of their eyes, till the oldest one among them speaks. Well now, a black whore in a white dress and a red belt. Damned if that ain't just a little too much color for Lakeside. What's wrong with you, whore? Can't you take a hint? She turns toward him, afraid but not showing it. She has lived 36 years on this earth, has known what a man has and where he wants to put it since she was 11. And she understands when men are together like this and full of red eye, she can smell it. They give up thinking for themselves and turn into a pack of dogs. If you show fear, they will fall on you like dogs and likely tear you apart like dogs. Also, they have been laying for her. There can be no other explanation for them turning up like this. What hint is that, sugar? She asks, standing her ground. Where is everyone? Where can they all be? God damn, across the lake, the Methodists have moved on to trust and obey. A droner, if ever there was one. That you ain't got no business walking where the white folks walk, Harry Oster says. His adolescent voice breaks into a kind of mouse squeak at the last word, and she laughs. She knows how unwise that is, but she can't help it. She's never been able to help her laughter any more than she's ever been able to help the way men look like this at her breasts and bottom. Blame it on God. Why? I can walk where I do, she says. I was told this was common ground. Ain't nobody got a right to keep me out.
Look.
Good, I'm glad. Ain't nobody has? You seen him doing it. You see us now, Gary Ambruster says, trying to sound tough. Sara looks at him with a species of kindly contempt that makes George... Did I say Gregory? It's George Ambruster. George shiver... Contempt that makes George shrivel up inside. His cheeks glow hot red. Son, she says, you only come out now because the decent folks is all somewhere else. Why do you want to let this old fella tell you what to do? Act decent and let a lady walk. I see it all as Devore fades and fades, at last becoming nothing but eyes under the blue cap in a rainy afternoon. Through him I can see the shattered remains.
Hey, Mom, look at this. A leaderboard.
Awesome. Where are you at on it? Do you have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And look, a celebration.
Mm-hmm. Through him I can see the shattered remains of my swimming float washing against the embankment. I see it all. I see her as she starts forward, walking straight at Devore. If she stands her jawing with them, something bad is going to happen. She feels it. And she never questions her feelings. And if she walks...
Look at this. I have tons of cars.
Mm-hmm. Very awesome, huh?
Yeah, awesome sauce.
And if she walks at any of the others, old Masao bore in on her from the side, pulling the rest after. Old Massa is the little old blue cap. In the little old blue cap is the wheel dog, the one she must face down. She can do it too. He's strong enough to make these boys one creature.
Hey,
his
you.
creature.
Are you hungry?
No. Why?
I am. Because I'm making a grilled cheese.
I make grilled cheese. You can make me one if you want. His creature, at least for the time being. But he doesn't... Okay, wait. But he doesn't have her force, her determination, her energy. In a way, she welcomes this confrontation. Reg has warned her to be careful, not to move too fast or try to make real friends until the rednecks, only Reggie calls them the blue gators, show themselves. How many and how crazy. But she goes her own course, trusts her own deep instincts. And here they are, only 7 of them, and really just the one bull gator. I'm stronger than you, old massa, she thinks, walking toward him. She fixes her eyes on his and will not let them drop. His are the ones that drop. His the mouth that quivers uncertainly at one corner. His the tongue that comes out as quick as a lizard's tongue to wet the lips. And all that's good. But even better is when he falls back a step. When he does, that the rest of them cluster in 2 groups or 3, and there it is, her way through. Faint and sweet are the Methodists, fainthy music carrying across the lake's still surface. A droner of a hymn, yes, but sweet across the miles. When we walk with the Lord in the light of His word, what a glory He sheds on our way. I'm stronger than you, sugar, she sings. I'm meaner than you. You may be the bull gator, but I'm the queen bee. And if you don't want me stinging on you, you best clear me the rest of the path. You bitch, he says, with his voice, but his voice is weak. He is already thinking this isn't the day. There's something about her he didn't quite see until he saw her right up close. Some black nigger, Hogan, I'm thinking it's Hogan, he didn't feel until now. Better wait for another day, better. Then he trips over a root or a rock, perhaps it's a very rock behind which she would finally come to rest, and falls down. His cap falls off, showing the big old bald spot on the top of his head. His pants split all the way up the seam, and Sara makes a crucial mistake. Perhaps she underestimates Jared DeVore's own very considerable personal force, or perhaps she just cannot help herself. The sounds of his breeches ripping is like a loud fart. In any case, she laughs. That raucous, smoke-broken laugh, which is her trademark, and her laugh becomes her doom. DeVore doesn't think. He simply gives her the leather from where he lies. Big foot and pagan logger's boots, shooting out like pistons. He hits her where she is thinnest and most vulnerable, in her ankles. She hollers in shocked pain.
Mom, look, it's really cool having this.
As the left one breaks. She goes down in a tumble, losing her furled parasol out of one hand. She draws in breath to scream again, and Jared says from where he is laying, "Don't let her. Dasn't let her holler." Bill Merrill falls on top of her full length, all 190 pounds of him. The breath she has drawn to scream with whooshes out in a gusty, almost silent sigh instead. Ben, who has never even danced with a woman, let alone lain on top of one like this, is instantly excited as a fool of her struggling beneath him. Excited by the feel of her struggling beneath him. He wiggles against her, laughing, and when she rakes her nails down his cheek, he barely feels it. The way it seems to him, he's all cock and a yard long. When she tries to roll over and get out from under that way, he rolls with her, lets her be on top, and he is totally surprised when she drives her forehead down on his. He sees stars. He is 18 years old, as strong as he will ever be, and he loses neither consciousness or his erection. Orrin Peebles tears away the back of her dress, laughing. "Pig pile," he cries in a breathy little whisper, and drops on top of her. Now he is dry humping her top side.
Are you going to make that R word?
I would need a pot of water first. Start some water. And Ben is dry humping just as enthusiastically from underneath. Dry humping like a billy goat, even with the blood pouring down the sides of his head from the split in the center of his brow. And she knows that if she can't scream, she is lost. If she can scream and if Keto hears, he'll run and get help, run and get Reg. But before she can try again, old Massa is squatting beside her and showing her the long-bladed knife. Yes.
Mr. Cheese is making some toast.
Grilled cheese.
Yeah.
Make a sound and I'll cut your nose off, he says. And that's when she gives up.
Moving that
Just pick it up and move it.
I need to put this down somewhere.
Okay.
Oh,
And that's when she gives up. They have brought her down after all, partly because she laughed at the wrong time, mostly out of pure buggerty bad luck. Now they will not be stopped, and best that Keto should stay away. Please, God, keep him back where he was. It was a good patch of berries, one that should keep him occupied an hour or more. He loves berry picking, and it won't take these men an hour. Harry Oster yanks her hair back, tears her dress off her shoulder, and begins to suck her on her neck. Old Massa is the only one not at her. Old Massa standing back, looking both ways along the street, his eyes slitted and weary. Old Massa looked like a mangy timber wolf done eating a whole generation of chicken house chickens, while managing to avoid every trap and snare. Hey, Irish, quit on her a minute, he tells Harry, then widens his wise gazing to the others. Get her in the puckies, you damn fools. Get her in there deep. They don't. They can't. They are too eager to have her. They arm yank her behind the fore.
Is that good enough for the water to be full?
Yeah. Behind the forehead of the gray rock and call it good. She doesn't pray easily, but she prays now. She prays for them to let her live. She prays for Keto to stay clear, to keep filling his buckets slow by eating every third handful.
Is this good enough?
Yes. She prays that if he does take a notion to catch up with her, he will see what's happening and run the other way as fast as he can. Run silent and get Reg. Stick this in her mouth, George Brewster pants, and don't you bite me, you bitch. They take her top and bottom, back and forth, 2 and 3 at a time.
Oh, Tupac!
He burnt the grilled cheese. Shake it. Swing it. Can we please deal with that? Give me a second, guys. I'm going to avoid that. Now that the alarm stopped going off, my son burnt grilled cheese, and we had to open some windows. So my apologies for the loud noise.
Not very many people like my cooking, but that just feels like
I will add in the description sexual assault. So now that I know this is happening, there is a trigger warning for assault. They take her top and bottom.
My cooking's better than Hazel's.
Back and
There
forth.
was one time her cooking had the consistency, texture, and flavor of vomit.
Tristan, you better hope your sister doesn't watch my lives. 2 and 3 at a time. They take her where anybody came along can't help but see them. And old Massa stands off a little, looking first at the panting young men grouped around her, kneeling with their trousers down and their thighs scratched from the bushes they are kneeling in. Then he peers up and down the path with his wild and wary eyes. Incredibly, one of them, it is Fred Dean, says, "Sorry, ma'am," after he shoots his load, feels his halfway up to east the Jesus. Okay? It's as if he accidentally kicked her in the shin while crossing his legs. And it doesn't end. There's come down her throat, come running down the crack of her ass. The young one has bitten the blood right out of her left breast, and it doesn't end. They are young,
No,
and
because
by the
Dad
time
doesn't have work, right?
he's at work.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Dad's already
And
at
by the
work, isn't
time
he?
the last one is finished, the first one, oh God, the first one is ready again. Across the river, the Methodists are now singing Blessed
Mom?
Assurance, Jesus is
I'm
mine.
sorry to interrupt, but is Dad at work right now?
Yes,
Okay, so I missed my chance to go out.
I have the car. Blessed Assurance, Jesus is mine. I'm just trying to get through this part. An old massa approaches her. She thinks, it's almost over, woman. He the last, hold on, hold steady, and it be over. He looks at the skinny redhead and the one who keeps squinching his eye up and tosses his head and tells them to watch the path. He's going to take his turn now that she's broke in.
Mom? Can I touch this?
Charge it over there, charge it in there, charge it wherever. He unbuckles his belt and buttons his fly. He pushes down his underwear. Dirty black at the knees, dirty yellow at the crotch. And as he drops a knee on either side of her, she sees the old massa's little massa is just as floppy as a snake with its neck broke. And before she can stop it, that raucous laughter bursts all unexpected from her again. I'm sorry. That description, with everything going on, I had to laugh with her. Even laying here covered with the hot jelly spend of her rapists, she can't help but see the funny side. Shut up, Devore growls at her and smashes the heel of one hard hand across her face, breaking her jawbone and her nose. Shut up, that howling. Reckon it might get stiffer if it was one of your boys laying here with his rosy red ass stuck up in the air, sugar, she asks. And then, for the last time, Sara laughs. Devore draws his hand back to hit her again, his naked loins laying against her naked loins, his penis a flaccid worm between them. But before he can bring a hand down, a child's voice cries, Ma, what are they doing to you? Ma, get off my ma, you bastards! She sits up in spite of Devore's weight, her laughter dying, her wide eyes searching Keto out and finding
Mom?
him. A slim...
Can I get on the tablet?
You need to ask if it's okay.
It's okay if I can go on the tablet. The one that Dad
Is
has.
it down here?
Tablet is
If it's not
forbidden.
down here, pick a TV show.
And you've got water going for your lunch, buddy.
Oh, yeah,
Her wide eyes searching Keto out and finding him. A slim young boy of 8 standing in the street, dressed in overalls and the straw hat and brand new canvas shoes, carrying a tin bucket in one hand. His lips are blue with juice. His eyes are wide with confusion and fright. Run, Keto, she screams. Run away! Red fire explodes in her head. She swoons back into the bushes, hearing old Massa from the great distance. Get him! Doesn't let him ramble now. Then she's going down a long dark slope. She's lost in a ghost house corridor that leads only deeper and deeper into its own convoluted bowels. From that deep falling place she hears him. She hears her darling one. He is screaming. I heard him screaming as I knelt by the gray rock with my carry bag beside me and no idea how I'd gotten to where I was. I certainly had no memory of walking here. I was crying in shock and horror and pity. Was she crazy? Well, no wonder. No fucking wonder. The rain was steady, but no longer apocalyptic. I stared at my fishy white hands on the gray rock for a few seconds, then looked down. Devore and the others were gone. The ripe and grassy stretch of decay filled my nose. It was like a physical assault. I fumbled in the carry bag.
What's that Johnny Depp movie where there's like that other guy that wrote a book and his name is Shooter?
Secret Window. I fumbled in the carry bag.
With my food!
He's probably trying to help. Stop yelling and stop swearing.
That type of
Please,
food doesn't get burned.
quiet down.
It's grilled cheese. It's supposed to burn.
No, can we please quiet down and not yell? I am trying to read. Thank you. I fumbled in the carry bag, found the steno mask Romy and Georgie had given me as a joke, and slipped it over my mouth and nose with fingers that felt numb and distant. I breathed shallowly and tentatively better, not a lot, but enough to keep from fleeing, which was undoubtedly what she wanted. No, she cried from somewhere behind me, and I grabbed the spade and dug in. I tore a great mouth in the ground with the first swipe, and each subsequent one deepened and widened it. The earth was soft and yielding, woven there with mats of thin roots, which parted easily under the blade. No, don't you dare! I wouldn't look around. I wouldn't give her a chance to push me away. She was stronger down here, perhaps because it had happened here. Was that possible? I didn't know and didn't care. All I cared about was getting this done. Where the roots were thicker, I hacked through them with a pruning knife. Leave me be! Now I did look around. Risked one quick glance because of the unnatural crackling sounds which had accompanied her voice, which now seemed to make her voice. The green lady was gone. The birch had somehow become Sarah Tidwell. It was Sarah's face, growing out of the crisscrossing branches and shining leaves. That rain-slicked face swayed, dissolved, came together, melted away, came together again. For a moment, all the mystery I had sensed down here was revealed. Her damp, shifting eyes were utterly human. They stared at me with hate and supplication. I ain't done, she cried in a cracked, breaking voice. He was the worst, don't you understand? He was the worst, and it's his blood in her, and I won't rest until I have it out. There was a gruesome ripping sound. She had inhibited the birch, made it into physical body of some sort, and intended to tear it free of the earth. She would come and get me with it if she could, kill me with it if she could, strangle me in limber branches, stuff me with leaves until I looked like a Christmas decoration. No matter how much of the monster he was, Kyra had nothing to do with what he did, I said, and you won't have her. Yes, I will, the green lady screamed. The ripping, rending sounds were louder now. They were joined by a hissing, shaky crackle. I didn't look around again. I didn't dare look around. I dug faster instead. Yes, I will have her, she cried. And now the voice was closer. She was coming for me, and I refused to see. When it comes to walking trees and bushes, I stick to Macbeth, thanks. I'll stick to Macbeth, thanks. I will have her. He took mine, and I mean to take his. Go away, a new voice said. The spade loosened in my hands, almost fell. I turned and saw Jo standing below me and to the right. She was looking at Sarah, who had materialized into a lunatic's hallucination, a monstrous greenish-black thing that slipped with every step it tried to walk along the street. She had left the birch behind, yet assumed its vitality somehow. The actual tree huddled behind her, black and shriveled and dead. The creature born of it looked like a bride of Frankenstein, as sculpted by Picasso. In it, Sarah's face came and went, came and went. The shape, I thought coldly, it was always real. And if it was always me, it was always her too. Jo was dressed in a white shirt and yellow slacks she'd had on the day she died. I couldn't see the lake through her, and I had been able to see it through Devore and Devore's young friends. She had materialized herself completely. I felt a curious draining sensation at the back of my skull, and thought I knew how. Get out, bitch, the Sarah thing snarled. It raised its arms toward Jo as it had raised them to me in my worst nightmares. Not at all, Jo's voice remained calm. She turned toward me. Hurry, Mike, you have to be quick. It's not really her anymore. She's let one of the outsiders in, and they're very dangerous. Joe, I love you. I love you. Sarah shrieked and began to spin. Leaves and branches blurred together and lost coherence. It was like watching something liquefy in a blender. The entirety, which had only looked a little like a woman to begin with, now dropped its masquerade entirely. Something elemental and grotesquely inhuman began to form out of the maelstrom. It leaped at my wife. When it struck her, the color and solidity left Joe as if slapped away by a huge hand. She became a phantom struggling with the thing which raved and shrieked and clawed at her. Hurry, Mike, she screamed, hurry! I bent to the job. The spade struck something that wasn't dirt, wasn't stone, wasn't wood. I scraped along it, revealing a filthy, molded, crusted swatch of canvas. Now I dug like a madman, wanting to clear as much of the buried object as I could, wanting to fatten my chances of success as much as I could. Behind me, the shape screamed in fury, and my wife screamed in pain. Sarah had given up part of her discorporate self in order to gain her revenge, had let in something Joe called the outsider. I had no idea what that meant, what that might be, and never wanted to know. Sarah was its conduit. I knew that much. And if I could take care of her in time, I reached into the dripping hole, slapping wet earth from the ancient canvas. Faint, stenciled letters appeared when I did. J. M. McCurdy, Sandmill. McCurdy's had burned in the fires of 33, I knew. I'd seen a picture of it in flames somewhere. As I seized the canvas, the tips of my fingers punching through and letting out a fresh billow of green and grassy stench, I could hear grunting. I could hear Devore. He's laying on top of her and grunting like a pig. Sarah is semi-conscious, muttering unintelligibly through bruised lips, which were shiny with blood. Devore is looking back over his shoulder at Draper Finney and Fred Dean. They have raced after the boy and brought him back, but he won't stop yelling.
Are you gonna make the emergency?
I will. Put your paws in when it boils.
He's
yelling to beat the band, yelling to wake the dead. And if they can hear the Methodists singing how I love to tell the story over here, then they may be able to hear the yelling nigger over there. Devore says, put him in the water, shut him up. The minute he says it, as though the words are magic words, his cock begins to stiffen. What do you mean? Ben Merrill asks. You know goddamn well, Jared says. His pants the words out, jerking his hips as he speaks. His narrow ass gleams in the afternoon light. He's seen us. You want to cut his throat? Get his blood all over you? Fine by me. Here, take my knife. Be my guest. No, Jared. Ben cries in horror. Nick, overflowing. Ben cries in horror, actually seeming to cringe at the sight of the knife. He is finally ready. It takes him a little longer, that's all. He ain't a kid like these other ones. But now, never mind her smart mouth, never mind her insolent way of laughing, never mind the whole township. Let 'em all show up and watch if they like. He slips it in her, what she's wanted all along, what all her kind want. He slips it in and sinks it deep. He continues giving orders even as he rapes her. Up and down his ass goes, tick-tock, just like a cat's tail. Somebody take care of him, or do what you want to, or do you want to spend 40 years rotting in Shawshank because of a nigger kid tattle? Ben seizes one of Keto Tidwell's arms, Orrin Peebles the other, and by the time they have dragged him as far as the embankment, they have lost their heart. Raping an uppity nigger woman with the gall to laugh at Jared when he fell down and split his britches is one thing. Drowning a scared kid like a kitten in a mud puddle? That's another one altogether. They loosen their grip, staring at each other's haunted eyes, and Keto pulls free. Run, honey, Sara cries. Run away and get... Jared clamps his hands around her throat and begins choking.
Mom?
The boy... Did you put the pasta in?
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think I put one box, the whole thing.
You might want to stir it.
Yeah.
The boy trips over his own berry bucket and thumps gracefully to the ground. Harry and Draper capture him easily. What are you going to do? Draper asks in a kind of desperate whine, and Harry replies, what I have to. That's what he replied. And now I am going to do what I had to. In spite of the stench, in spite of Sara, in spite of my dead wife's shrieks, I hauled the roll of canvas out of the ground. The ropes, which had tied it shut at either end, held, but the roll itself split down the middle in a hideous burping sound. Hurry, Joe cried. I can't hold it much longer. It snarled. It bayed like a dog. There was a loud wooden crunch, like a door being slammed hard enough to splinter, and Joe wailed. I grabbed for the carry bag and the slips and greens printed on the front and tore it open as Harry, the others call him Irish because of his carrot-colored hair, grabs the struggling kid in a clumsy kind of bear hug and jumps into the lake with him. The kid struggles harder than ever. His straw hat comes off and floats on the water. Get that, Harry pants. Friend Dean kneels and fishes out the dripping hat. Fred's eyes are dazed. He's got the look of a fighter, about one round from hitting the canvas. Behind them, Sara Tidwell has begun to rattle deep in her chest and throat, like the sight of the boy's clenching hand. These sounds will haunt Draper Finney until his final dive into Edith's query. Jared sinks his fingers deeper, pumping and choking at the same time, the sweat pouring off him. No amount of washing will take the smell of that sweat out of these clothes. And when he begins to think of it as murder sweat, he burns the clothes to get shed of it. He burns the clothes to get shed of it. Harry Oster.
On November 1st, on Tubi TV, it's going to be the La 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 movie, Smurfs, from 2011. It's coming to November 1st.
Okay. Harry Oster wants to be shed of it all. To be shed of it and never see these men again. Most of all, Jared DeVore, who he now thinks must be Lord Satan himself. Harry cannot go home and face his father unless this nightmare is over, buried. And his mother? How can he ever face his beloved mother, Bridget Oster, with her round, sweet Irish face and graying hair and comforting shelf of bosom? Bridget has always had a kind word or a soothing hand for him. Bridget Oster, who has been saved, washed in the blood of the Lamb. Bridget Oster, who is even now serving pies at the picnic they're having at the new church. Bridget Oster, who is Mama. How can he ever look at her again, or she him, if he has to stand in court on a charge of raping and beating a woman, even a black woman? So he yanks the clinging boy away. Keto scratches him once, just a nick on the side of the neck. Then, and that night, Harry will tell his mama it was a bush pricker that caught him unawares, and he will let her put a kiss on it. And then he plunges the child into the lake. Keto looks up at him, his face shimmering, and Harry sees a little fish flick by. A perch, he thinks. For an instant he wonders what the boy must see, looking up through the silver shield of the surface at the face of the fellow who's holding him down, the fellow who's drowning him. And then Harry pushes that away. Just a nigger, he reminds himself desperately. That's all he is. Just a nigger. No kin of yours. Keto's arm comes out of the water. His dripping, dark brown arm. Harry pulls back, not wanting to be clawed, but the hand doesn't reach for him, only sticks straight up. The fingers curl into a fist. Open, curl into a fist. Open, curl into a fist. The boy's thrashing begins to ease. The kicking feet begin to slow down. The eyes looking up into Harry's eyes are taking on a curious, dreamy look. And still that brown arm sticks straight up. Still the hand opens and closes, opens and closes. Draper Finney stands on the shore crying, sure that now someone will come along. Now someone will see the terrible thing they have done. The terrible thing they are in fact still doing. Be sure your sin will find you out, it says in the good book. Be sure. He opens his mouth to tell Harry to quit. Maybe it's still not too late to take it back. Let him up. Let him live. But no sound comes out. Behind him, Sara is choking her last. In front of him, her drowning son's hand opens and closes. Opens and closes. The reflection of it shimmering on the water. And Draper thinks, won't it stop doing that? Won't it ever stop doing that? And as if it were a prayer that something is now answering, the boy's locked elbow begins to bend and his arm begins to sag. The fingers begin to close again into a fist and then stop. For a moment, the hand wavers, and then I slam the heel of my hand into the center of my forehead to clear these phantoms away. Behind me, there was a frenzied snap and a crackle of wet bushes as Jo and whatever she was holding back continued to struggle. I put my hands inside the split in the canvas like a doctor spreading a wound. I yanked. There was a low ripping sound as the roll tore the rest of the way up and down. Inside was what remained of them. 2 yellow skulls, forehead to forehead, as if to imitate conversation. The woman's faded red leather belt, a molder of clothes, and a heap of bones.
There you go. More pieces real quick.
I'll explain why there's not merchandise all over.
A little bit longer. 2 rib cages, one large and one small. 2 sets of legs, one long and one short. The early remains of Sara and Keto Tidwell, buried here by the lake for almost 100 years. The larger of the 2 skulls turned. It glared at me with its empty eye sockets. Its teeth chattered as if it would bite me, and the bones below it began a tenebrous, jittery stirring. Some broke apart immediately. All were soft and pitted. The red belt stirred restlessly, and the rusty buckle rose like the head of a snake. Mike! Jo screamed. Quick! Quick! I pulled the sack out of the carry bag and grabbed the plastic bottle which had been inside. Lie still. The Magnabet letters had said. Another little word trick. Another message passed behind the unsuspecting guard's back. Sara Tidwell was a fearsome creature, but she had underestimated Jo, and she had underestimated the telepathy of long association as well. I had gone to Slips and Greens. I had bought a bottle of lye, and now I opened it and poured it, smoking over the bones of Sara and her son. There was a hissing sound, like the one you hear when you open a beer or a bottled soft drink. The belt buckle melted. The bones turned white and crumbled like things made out of sugar. I had a nightmare image of Mexican children eating candy corpses off long sticks on the Day of the Dead. The eye sockets of Sara's skull widened as the lie filled the dark hollow where her mind, her prodigious talent, and her laughing soul had once resided. It was an expression that looked, at first, like surprise, and then like sorrow. The jaw fell off. The nubs of the teeth sizzled away. The top of the skull caved in. Spread finger bones jittered, then melted.
Done. One more time.
I don't think it is. I could be wrong. A little bit longer. You don't have to put that one back in if you don't. Spread finger bones. Yeah, it's a little thicker.
Thicker noodle.
Spread finger bones jittered, then melted. Oh, it whispered through the soaking trees like a rising wind. Only the wind had died as the wet air caught its breath before the next onslaught. It was the sound of unspeakable grief and longing and surrender. I sensed no hate in it. Her hate was gone, burned away in the corrosive I had bought in Helen Oster's shop. The sound of Sarah's going was replaced by a plaintive, almost human cry of a bird, and it awakened me from the place where I had been, brought me finally and completely out of the zone. I got shakily to my feet, turned around, and looked at the street. Joe was still there, a dim form through which I could now see the lake and the dark clouds of the next thunder squall coming over the mountains. Something flickered behind her, like that bird venturing out of its safe covert for a peek at the rearranged environment, perhaps. But I barely registered it. It was Joe I wanted to see. Joe who had come God knew how far and suffered God knew how much to help me. She looked exhausted, hurt, in some fundamental way diminished. But the other thing, the outsider, was gone. Joe, standing in the ring of birch leaves, so dead they looked charred, turned to me and smiled. Joe, we did it. Her mouth moved. I heard the sound, but the words were too distant to make out. She was standing right there, but she might have been calling across a wide canyon. Still, I understood her. I read the words off her lips, if you prefer the rationale, right out of her mind, if you prefer the romantical. I prefer the latter. Marriage is a zone, too, you know. Marriage is a zone. So that's all right, isn't it? I glanced down into the gaping roll of canvas and saw nothing but stubs and splinters sticking out of the noxious, uneasy paste. I got a whiff, and even through the stenomask, it made me cough and back away. Not corruption, lie. When I looked back around at Joe, she was barely there. Joe, wait! Can't help, can't stay. Words from another star system, barely glimpsed on the fading mouth. Now she was little more than eyes floating in the dark afternoon, eyes which seemed made of the lake behind them. Hurry! She was gone. I slipped and stumbled to a place where she'd been, my feet crunching over dead birch leaves, and grabbed at nothing. What a fool I must have looked, soaked to the skin, wearing a stenomask askew over the lower half of my face, trying to embrace the wet gray air. I got the faintest whiff of red perfume, and then only damp earth, lake water, and the vile stink of lye running under everything. At least the smell of putrefaction was gone.
That one's smooth, right?
Now it's better.
I found one of them in the pot.
Okay, hold on. I will come out. Yes, I will come out in just a sec. At least the smell of the putrefaction was gone. That had been no more real than what? Then what? Either it was all real or none of it was real. If none of it was real, I was out of my mind and ready for the blue wing at Juniper Hill. I looked over toward the gray rock and saw the bag of bones I had pulled out of the wet ground.
Mom?
No, I need a small bowl. Oh, yeah, you can use that one.
Yeah, we can do this.
We don't need to. There's also a small drainer in the drain.
We can drain it, and it would lift up and drains
There is a small strainer in the drainer.
You do what the sink is full.
I will get it in just a second. I looked over toward the gray rock and saw a bag of bones I had pulled out of the wet ground like a festering tooth. Lazy tendrils of smoke were still rising from its ripped length. That much was real. So was the green lady, who was now a soot-colored black lady, as dead as the dead branch behind her, and the one that seemed to point like an arm. Oh, we're almost to 29 and then the epilogue. So give me just a few minutes. I will come back and I will continue. I'm going to take like 5 minutes and help my son. So I will be right back. You guys get something to drink, something to eat, whatever. I'm just going to be right back on my screen. Ugh. All right. Now that you've got your pasta done.
Give me like this thing. Wow. That's what I want
Are
you
the dishes go away?
No.
Yeah.
It's over there, you know. Do you drink some of the It's easy, though. Put that. But don't worry, you'll be eating by like this. Yeah.
You come and have water.
Oh, you do realize you have Parmesan now.
Do you want that cheese instead?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That'd be even better. Except now I need butter.
Butter's one right there.
Butter. Oh, butter's right here.
Have a butter or
Yeah.
give me the tub of that.
Oh, tub of butter, yes. Do you have a spoon? A spoon?
Yeah, I use that. Previous one was.
Well, get some bowls. If your siblings want to eat.
Bell.
Yeah, Belle was nice.
Parmesan
And tell Belle thank you for the Parmesan.
Thank you for the Parmesan.
No, I didn't. We ate without the Parmesan. But...
Yeah. I was like, even if they did, I would still get some.
Alright, so put this in your bowl and then put do you guys want Parmesan in the pasta or do you want it just in your bowl? Alright.
The whole thing or just.
Oh, God, no, not that much.
Hey.
Why is there a cat down here? Is he on the stairs or down here? Oh, okay.
That's down here.
Banister ornament. Yeah, as always. Kind of funny. What's up? Going for sharp.
Let's go.
Did you hear the language in this book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Bag of Bones by Stephen King. And the thing of it is back then in the early 1900s, that was the language.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't start to change. And even nowadays, you will hear the wrong people say those words.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's right, but it's not just racists either. There's others that can use that language. So for me to use it, it's very heartbreaking, but it's part of the book, which is the only reason I am saying any of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there was once a book I read that I had to read in English class in high school.
Kill a Mockingbird? No.
There was some other book that had like either had the N word or some other word, and it was just like.
Oh yeah, it's really hard to do. And I'm sitting here.
That man's mind.
Well, that's the thing. It really is one of those like, you have to put yourself in that kind of environment to be able to understand. Like when you're writing from way back then. You're writing from that time period. That would be the language.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they weren't African Americans. They weren't those of color. They were bad words. So that's where that comes into mind.
When, like, the Black Panthers, Martin Luther King Jr., all of those people started coming through and showed people, hey, this is what you're doing to us.
Exactly. The only thing difference is our color of skin. Everything underneath is the same.
Yeah, and all of this is just like
just a pigment difference.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
Exactly. It's crazy.
Yep.
All right, guys, let's continue, shall we? As dead as the dead branch behind her, the one that seemed to point like an arm. Can't help, can't stay, hurry. Couldn't help with what? What more help did I need? I was done. It was done, wasn't it? Sara was gone. Spirit follows bone. Good night, sweet ladies. God grant she lie still. And still a kind of stinking terror, not so different from the smell of putrescence, which had come out of the ground, seemed to sweat out of the air. Kyra's name began to beat in my head. Kai, 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 like the call of some exotic tropical bird. I stared up at the railroad tie steps to the house, and although I was exhausted, by the time I was halfway up, I began to run. I climbed the stairs to the deck and went in that way. The house looked the same, save for the broken tree poking in through the kitchen window. Sara Laughs had stood up to the storm very well. Something was wrong. There was something, and perhaps I did smell it, bitter and low. Lunacy may have its own wild vetch aroma. It's not the kind of thing I could even ever care to research. In the front hall I stopped, looking down at the heap of paperback books. Elmore Leonard's and Ed McBain's lying on the floor, as if they had been raked off the shelf by a passing hand. A flailing hand, maybe. I could also see my tracks there, both coming and going. They had already begun to dry. They should have been the only ones. I had been carrying Kai when we came in. They should have been, but they weren't. The others were smaller, but not so small that I mistook them for a child's. I ran down the hall to the north bedroom crying her name, and I might as well have been crying Maddie or Joe or Sara. Coming out of my mouth, Kyra's name sounded like the name of a corpse. The duvet had been thrown back onto the floor, except for the black stuffed dog lying where it had in my dreams. The bed was empty, and Kai was gone. This is bad. This is very bad. Chapter 29. I reached for Kai with the part of my mind that had for the last few weeks known what she was wearing, what room of the trailer she was in, and what she was doing there. There was nothing, of course. That link had been dissolved. I called for Joe, I think I did, but Joe was gone too. I was on my own. God help me, God help us both. I could feel panic trying to descend and fought it off. I had to keep my mind clear. If I couldn't think, any chance Kai might still have would be lost. I walked rapidly back down the hall to the foyer, trying not to hear a sick voice in the back of my head, the one saying that Kai was lost already, dead already. I knew no such thing, couldn't know it now that the connection between us was broken. I looked down at the heap of books, then up at the door. The new tracks had come in this way and gone out this way, too. Lightning stroked the sky and thunder cracked. The wind was rising again. I went to the door, reached for the knob, then paused. Something was caught in the crack between the door and the jamb. Something as fine and floaty as a strand of spider silk. A single white hair. I looked at it with a sick lack of surprise. I should have known, of course. And if not for the strain I'd been under and the successive shocks of this terrible day, I would have known. It was all on the tape John had played for me that morning, a time that already seemed part of another man's life. For one thing, there was a time check marking the point where John had hung up on her, 9:40 a.m. Eastern Daylight, the robot voice had said, which meant that Roget had been calling at 6:40 in the morning, if that was, she'd really been calling from Palm Springs. That was at least possible, had the oddity occurred to me while we were driving from the airport to Maddie's trailer. I would have told myself that there was no doubt insomniacs all over California who finished their Eastern Coast business before the sun had hauled itself fully over the horizon, and good for them. But there was something else that couldn't be explained away so easily. At one point, John had ejected the tape. He did it because, he said, I'd gone as white as a sheet instead of looking amused. I had told him to go on and play the rest. It had just surprised me to hear her again. The quality of her voice, Christ, the reproduction is good. Except, it was really the boys in the basement who had reacted to John's tape. My subconscious conspirators. And it hadn't been her voice that had scared them badly enough to turn my face white. The underhum had done that. The characteristic underhum you always got on the TR calls, both those you made and those you received. Roget Whitmore had never left TR 90 at all. And if my failing to realize that this morning cost Kai DeVore her life this afternoon, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. I told God that over and over as I went plunging down the railroad tie steps again, running into the face of the revitalized storm. It's the blue-eyed wonder I didn't go flying right off the embankment. Oh, it's a blue-eyed wonder. Off the embankment. Half my swimming float had grounded there, and perhaps I could have impaled myself on its splintered boards and died like a vampire, withered on a stake. What a pleasant thought that was. Running isn't good for people near panic. It's like scratching poison ivy. By the time I had thrown my arm around one of the pines at the foot of the steps to check my progress, I was on the edge of losing all coherent thought. Kai's name was beating in my head again, so loudly there wasn't room for much else. Then a stroke of lightning leaped out of the sky to my right and knocked the last 3 feet of trunk out from beneath the huge old spruce, which had probably been here when Sarah and Keto were still alive. If I'd been looking directly at it, I would have been blinded. Even with my head turned 3/4 away, the stroke left a huge blue splotch, like the aftermath of a gigantic camera flash floating in front of my eyes. There was a grinding, juddering sound as 200 feet of blue spruce toppled into the lake, sending up a large curtain of spray, which seemed to hang between the gray sky and the gray water. The stump was on fire in the rain, burning like a witch's hat. It had the effect of a slap, clearing my head and giving me one final chance to use my brain. I took a breath and forced myself to do just that. Why had I come down here in the first place? Why did I think Roget had brought Kyra toward the lake, where I had just been, instead of carrying her away from me, up the driveway to lane 42? Don't be stupid. She came down here because the street's the way back to Warrington's, and Warrington's is where she's been, all by herself, ever since she sent the boss's body back to California in his private jet. She had sneaked into the house while I was under Joe's studio, finding the tin box in the belly of the owl and studying the scrap of genealogy. She would have taken Kai then if I had given her the chance, but I didn't. I came hurrying back, afraid something was wrong, afraid someone might be trying to get a hold of the kid. Had Roget awakened her? Had Kai seen her and tried to warn me before drifting off again? Was that what had brought me in such a hurry? Maybe. I'd still been in the zone then. Well, we'd still been linked then. Roget had certainly been in the house when I came back. She might even have been in the north bedroom closet and peering at me through the crack. Part of me had known it too. Part of me had left her. I'd felt something that was not Sarah. Then I'd left again, grabbed the carry bag from Slips and Greens, and come down here, turned right and turned north, toward the birch, the rock, the bag of bones. I'd done what I had to do, and while I was doing it, Roget carried Kyra down the railroad tie steps behind me and turned left on the street, turned south toward Warrington's, With a sinking feeling deep in my belly, I realized I had probably heard Kai, might even have seen her. That bird peeking timidly out from cover during the lull had been no bird. Kai was awake by then. Kai had seen me, perhaps even had seen Joe as well, and tried to call out. She had managed just one little peep before Roget had covered her mouth. How long ago had that been? It seems like forever, but I had an idea it hadn't been long at all. Less than 5 minutes, maybe. But it doesn't take long to drown a child. The image of Keto's bare arm sticking straight out of the water tried to come back. The hand at the end of it opening and closing, as if I was trying to breathe for the lungs that couldn't, and I pushed it away. I also suppressed the urge to simply sprint in the direction of Warrington's. Panic would take me for sure if I did. In all the years since her death, I had never longed for Joe with the bitter intensity I felt then. But she was gone. There wasn't even a whisper of her. With no one to depend on but myself, I started south along the tree-littered street, skirting the blowdowns where I could, crawling under them if they blocked my way entirely, taking the noisy branch-breaking course over the top only as a last resort. And as I went, I issued what I imagined was all the standard prayers in such a situation, but none of them seemed to get past the image of Roget Whitmore's face rising in my mind, her screaming, merciless face. I remember thinking, this is the outdoor version of the ghost house. Certainly the woods seemed haunted to me as I struggled along. Trees only loosened in the first grand blow were falling by the score in this follow-up cap of wind and rain. The noise was like great crunching footfalls, but I didn't need to worry about the noise that my own feet were making. When I passed the bachelor's camp, a circular prefab construction site.
Hey, I thought you said we didn't have any Parmesan.
We didn't have any last night. Construction sighting on the outcrop of rock, like a hat on a footstool, I saw that the entire roof had been bashed flat by a hammock. Oh, a hemlock. Oh my good lord. Yeah, a cloth hammock is going to knock over something, and crash it in. The roof had been bashed flat by a hemlock. Half a mile south of Sara, I saw one of Kai's white hair ribbons lying in the path. I picked it up, thinking how much that red edging looked like blood. Then I stuffed it into my pocket and went on. 5 minutes later, I came to an old moss-caked pine that had fallen across the path. It was still connected by its stump by a stretched and bent network of splinters, and squalled like a line of rusty hinges as the surging water lifted and dropped what had been its upper 20 or 30 feet, now floating in the lake. There was space to crawl under, and when I dropped to my knees, I saw other knee tracks just beginning to fill with water. I saw something else, a second hair ribbon. I tucked it into my pocket with the first. I was halfway under the pine when I heard another tree go over, this one much closer. The sound was followed by a scream, not pain or fear, but surprised anger. Then, even over the hiss of the rain and wind, I could hear Roget's voice. "Come back! Don't go down there! It's dangerous!" I squirmed the rest of the way under the tree, barely feeling the stump of the branch, which tore a groove in my lower back, got to my feet, and sprinted along the path. If the fallen trees I came to were small, I hurled them without slowing down. They were bigger. I scrambled over with no thought to where they might claw or dig in. Thunder whacked. There was a brilliant stroke of lightning, and in its glare, I saw a gray barn board through the trees. On the day I'd first seen Roget, I'd only been able to catch glimpses of Warrington's lodge, and now the forest had been torn open like an old garment. This area would be years recovering. The lodge's rear half had been pretty well demolished by a pair of huge trees that seemed to have fallen together. They had crossed like a knife and fork on a diner's plate, and lay on the ruins in a shaggy X. Kai's voice, rising over the storm, only because it was shrill with terror. "Go away! I don't want you, White Nana! Go away!" It was horrible to hear the terror in her voice, but wonderful to hear her voice at all. About 40 feet from where Roget's shout had frozen me in place, one more tree lay across the path. Roget herself stood on the far side of it, holding a hand out to Kai. The hand was dripping blood, but I hardly noticed. It was Kyra I noticed. The dock running between the street and the Sunset Bar was a long one, 70 feet at least, perhaps 100. Long enough so that on the pretty summer evening you could stroll on it hand in hand with your date or your lover and make a memory. The storm hadn't torn it away, not yet. But the wind had twisted it like a ribbon. I remember newsreel footage of at some childhood Saturday matinee film of a suspension bridge dancing in a hurricane. And that was what the dock between Warrington's and the Sunset Bar looked like. It jousted up and down in the surging water, groaning in all its slated joints like a wooden accordion. There had been a rail, presumably to guide those who made a heavy night of it safely back to shore. But it was gone now. Kyra was halfway out along the swaying, dripping length of wood. I could see at least 3 rectangles of blackness between the shore and where she stood, places where boards had snapped off. From beneath the dock came the disturbed clunk, clunk, clung, clung, clung of the empty steel drums that were holding it up. Several of these drums had come unanchored and were floating away. Kai had her arms stretched out for balance, like a tightrope walker in a circus. The black Harley-Davidson t-shirt flapped around her knees and sunburned shoulders. "Come back!" Roget cried. Her lank hair flew around her head. The shiny black raincoat she was wearing rippled. She was holding both hands out now, one bloody and one not. I had an idea Kai might have bitten her. "No, White Nana!" Kai shook her head in a wild negation, and I wanted to tell her, "Don't do that, Kai Bird. Don't shake your head like that. Very bad idea." She tottered, one arm pointed up to the sky and one down at the water, so she looked for a moment like an airplane in a steep bank. If the dock had picked that moment to take a hard buck beneath her, Kai would have spilled off the side. She gained some precious balance instead, although I thought I saw her bare feet slide a little on the slick boards. "Go away, White Nana. I don't want you. Go take a nap. You look tired." Kai didn't see me. All her attention was fixed on the White Nana. The White Nana didn't see me either. I dropped to my belly and squirmed under the tree, pulling myself along with my clawed hands. Thunder rolled across the lake like a big mahogany ball, the sound echoing off the mountains. When I got to my knees again, I saw that Roget was advancing slowly toward the shore end of the dock. For every step she took forward, Kai took a shaky, dangerous step backward. Roget was holding her good hand out, though for a moment I thought this one had begun to bleed as well. The stuff running through her bunchy fingers was too dark for blood, however. When she began to talk, speaking in a hideous, coaxing voice that made my skin crawl, I realized it was melting chocolate. "Let's play a game, Kai Bird," Roget cooed. "Do you want to start?" She took a step. Kai took a compensatory step backward, tottering, caught her balance. My heart stopped, then resumed racing. I closed the distance between myself and the woman as rapidly as I could, but I didn't run. I didn't want her to know a thing until she woke up. If she woke up. I didn't care if she did or not. Hell, if I could fracture the back of George Footman's skull with a hammer, I could certainly put a hurt on this horror. As I walked, I laced my hands together into one large fist. No! Don't want to start. Too shy. No, don't want to start? Too shy? Roget spoke in a sugary, romper room voice that made me want to grind my teeth together. Romper Room. Wow, that was a show from way back in the early 80s. Late in the 70s. All right, I'll start. Happy. What rhymes with happy, Kybird? Pappy and nappy. You were taking a nappy, weren't you, when I came and woke you up? And lappy. Would you like to come and sit on my lappy, Kybird? We'll feed each other chocolate, just like we used to. I'll tell you a new knock-knock joke. Another step. She had come to the edge of the dock. If she thought of it, she could simply have thrown rocks at Kyra as she had at me. Thrown until she connected with one and knocked Kai into the lake. But I don't think she got even close to such a notion. Once crazy goes past a certain point, you're on a turnpike with no exit ramps. Roget had other plans for Kyra. Come on, Kai, play the game with White Nana. She held out the chocolate again, gooey Hershey kisses dripping through crumbled foil. Kyra's eyes shifted, and at last she saw me. I shook my head, trying to tell her to be quiet, but it was no good. An expression of joyous relief crossed her face. She cried out my name, and I saw Roget's shoulders go up in surprise. I ran the last dozen feet, raising my joined hands like a club, but I slipped a little on the wet ground at the crucial moment, and Roget made a kind of ducking cringe. Instead of striking her in the back of the neck as I had meant to, my joined hands only glanced off her shoulder. She staggered, went to one knee, and was up almost at once. Her eyes were like little blue arc lamps, spitting rage instead of electricity. You, she said, hissing the word over the top of her tongue, turning it into the sound of some ancient curse. Hey, you! Behind us, Kyra screamed my name, stagger dancing on the wet wood and waving her arms in an effort to keep from falling into the lake. Water slopped onto the deck and ran over her small bare feet. Hold on, Kai. I would like some. But hold on, Kai, I called back. Roget saw my attention shift and took her chance. She spun and ran onto the dock. I sprang after her, grabbed her by her hair, and it came off in my hand, all of it. I stood there on the edge of the surging lake with her mat of white hair dangling from my fist like a scalp. Roget looked over her shoulder, snarled, an ancient bald gnome in the rain, and I thought, it's him. It's Devore. He never died at all. Somehow he and the woman swapped identities. She was the one who committed suicide. It was her body that went back to California on the jet.
There you go, Mom.
Thank you, sweetheart. Even as she turned the other way again and began to run toward Kai, I knew better. It was Roget, all right, but she'd come by that hideous resemblance honestly. Whatever was wrong with her had done more than make her hair fall out. It had aged her as well. 70, I'd thought, but that had to be at least 10 years beyond the actual mark. I've known a lot of folks name their kids alike, Mrs. M had told me. They think it's cute. Max Devore must have thought so too, because he had named a son Roger and his daughter Roget. Perhaps she'd come by the Whitmore part honestly. She might have been married in her younger years, but once the wig was gone, her antecedents were beyond argument. The woman tottering along the wet dock to finish the job was Kyra's aunt. Kai began to back up rapidly, making no effort to be careful and pick her footing. She was going into the drink There was no way she could stay up. But before she could fall, a wave slapped the dock between them and the place where some of the barrels had come loose, and the slatted walkway was already partly submerged. Okay, now my hair's in my face. Foamy water flew up and began to twist into one of the helix shapes, into one of those helix shapes I had seen before. Roguette stopped ankle deep in the water, sloshing over the deck, and I stopped about 12 feet behind her. The shape solidified, and even before I could make out the face, I recognized the baggy shorts, which were fading swirls of color, and the smock top. What? Only Kmart sells smock tops of such perfect shapelessness. I think it might be a federal law. It was Maddie. A grave gray Maddie, looking at Roguette with grave gray eyes. Roguette raised her hands, tottered, tried to turn, and at that moment a wave surged over the dock, making it rise and then drop like an amusement park ride. Roguette went over the side. Beyond her, beyond the water shape in the rain, I could see Kai sprawling on the porch of the Sunset Bar. That last heave had flipped her to temporary safety like a human tiddlywink. Maddie was looking at me, her lips moving, her eyes on mine. I had been able to tell what Joe was saying, but this time I had no idea. I tried with all my might, but I couldn't make it out. Mommy, Mommy! The figure didn't so much as turn as revolve. It didn't actually seem to be there below the hem of the long shorts. It moved up the dock to the bar, where Kai was now standing with her arms held out. Something grabbed at my foot. I looked down and saw a drowning apparition in the surging water. Dark eyes stared up at me from beneath the bald. Roguette was coughing water from between lips that were as purple as plums. Her free hand waved weakly up at mine, the fingers open and closed. Open and closed. I dropped to one knee and took it. It clamped over mine like a steel claw, and she yanked, trying to pull me in with her. The purple lips peeled back from yellow tooth pegs like those in Sarah's skull, and yes, I thought that this time Roguette was the one laughing. I rocked on my haunches and yanked her up. I didn't think about it. It was pure instinct. I had her by at least 100 pounds, and 3/4 of her came out of the lake like a gigantic freakish trout. She screamed, darted her head forward, and buried her teeth into my wrist. The pain was immediate and enormous. I jerked my arm up even higher and then brought it down, not thinking about hurting her, wanting only to rid myself of that weasel's mouth. Another wave hit the half-submerged dock as I did. Its rising splintered edge impaled Roguette's descending face. One eye popped. A dripping yellow splinter ran up her nose like a dagger. The scant skin of her forehead split, snapping away from the bone like two suddenly released window shades. Then the lake pulled her away. I saw the torn topography of her face a moment longer, upturned into the torrential rain, wet and as pale as the light from the fluorescent bar. Then she rolled over, her black vinyl raincoat swirling around her like a shroud. What I saw when I looked back toward the Sunset Bar was another glimpse under the skin of this world. The one far different from the face of Sarah in The Green Lady or the snarling, half-glimpsed shape of the outsider. Kyra stood on the wide wooden porch in front of the bar amid a litter of overturned wicker furniture. In front of her was a waterspout in which I could still see, very faintly, the fading shape of a woman. She was on her knees, holding her arms out. They tried to embrace. Kai's arms went through Maddie and came out dripping. Mommy, I can't get you. The woman in the water was speaking. I could see her lips moving. Kai looked at her, rapt. Then for just a moment, Maddie turned to me. Our eyes met, and hers were made of the lake. They were dark score, which was here long before I came, and will remain long after I am gone. I put my hands to my mouth, kissed my palms, and held them out to her. Shimmering hands went up, as if to catch those kisses. "Mommy, don't go!" Kai screamed, and flung her arms around the figure. She was immediately drenched and backed away, with her eyes squinched shut, coughing. There was no longer a woman with her. There was only water running across the boards and dripping through the cracks to rejoin the lake, which came up from deep springs far below. From the fissures in the rock which underlies the TR, all this part of our world. Moving carefully, doing my own balancing act, I made my way out along the wavering dock to the Sunset Bar. When I got there, I took Kyra in my arms. She hugged me tight, shivering fiercely against me. I could hear the small dice cup rattle of her teeth and the smell of the lake in her hair. "Maddie came," she said. "I know, I saw her. Maddie made the white Nana go away." "I saw that too." "Be very still now, Kai. We're going back to solid ground. But you can't move around a lot. If you do, we'll end up swimming." She was good as gold. When we were on the street again and I tried to put her down, she clung to my neck fiercely. That was okay with me. I thought of taking her into Warrington's, but didn't. There would be towels in there, probably dry clothes as well, but I had an idea there might also be a bathtub full of warm water waiting in there. Besides, the rain was slacking again, and this time the sky looked lighter in the west. "What did Maddie tell you, hun?" I asked as she walked north along the street. Kai would let me put her down so she could crawl under the down trees we came to, but raised her arms to be picked up again on the far side of each. "To be a good girl and not be sad. But I am sad. I'm very sad." She began to cry. I stroked her wet hair. By the time we got to the railroad tie steps, she had cried herself out, and over the mountains in the west, I could see one small but very brilliant wedge of blue. "All the woods fell down," Kai said, looking around. Her eyes were very wide. "Well, not all, but a lot of them, I guess." Halfway up the steps, I paused, puffing and seriously winded. I didn't ask Kai if I could put her down, though. I didn't want to put her down. I just wanted to catch my breath. "Mike?" "What, doll?" "Maddie told me something else." "What? Can I whisper?" "If you want to, sure." Kai leaned close, put her lips to my ear, and whispered. I listened. When she was done, I nodded, kissed her cheek, and shifted her to the other hip and carried her the rest of the way up to the house. 'Twas the swan of the century, chummy, and don't you go thinking that it was. No, sir. So said the old-timers, who sat in front of the big Army medic's tent that served as the Lakeview General that late summer and fall. A huge elm had toppled across Route 68 and bashed the store in like a saltines box. Adding insult to injury, the elm had carried a bunch of splitting live lines with it. Oh, is she going?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to be reading, so I will see you next week.
Yes, ma'am. Guys, have a great
You too. They ignited propane from the ruptured tank, and the whole thing went kaboom. The tent was a pretty good warm weather substitute, although the folks on the TR took to saying they were going down to the MASH for bread and beer. You could still see a faded red cross on both sides of the tent roof. The old-timers sat along one canvas wall in folding chairs, waving to other old-timers when they went pootin' by in their rusty old-timer cars. All certified old-timers own either Fords or Chevys, so I'm well on my way in that regard. swapping their undershirts for flannels as the days began to cool toward cider season and spud digging, watching the township start to rebuild itself around them. And as they watched, they talked about the ice storm of the past winter, the one that knocked out lights and splintered the million trees between Kittery and Fort Kent. They talked about the cyclones that touched down in August of '85. They talked about the sleet hurricane of 1927. Now there was some storms, they said. There was some storms, by gory. I'm sure they've got a point, and I don't argue with them. You rarely win an argument with a genuine Yankee old-timer. Never if it's about the weather. But for me, the storm of July 21st, 1998 will always be the storm. And I know a little girl who feels the same. She may live until 2100, given all the benefits of modern medicine. But I think that for Kyra Elizabeth DeVore, that will always be the storm. The one where her dead mother came to her dressed in the lake. The first vehicle to come down my driveway didn't arrive until almost 6 o'clock. It turned out to be not a Castle County police car, but a yellow bucket loader with yellow flashing lights on top of the cab and a guy in Central Maine Power Company slicker working the controls. The guy in the other seat was a cop, though. Was in fact Norris Ridgwick, the county sheriff himself, and he came to my door with his gun drawn. The change in the weather the TV guy had promised had already arrived, clouds and storm cells driven east by a chilly wind running just under gale force. Trees had continued to fall in the dripping woods for at least an hour after the rain stopped. Around 5 o'clock, I made us toasted cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, comfort food. Joe would have called it. Kyra ate listlessly, but she did eat. She drank a lot of milk. I had wrapped her in another of my T-shirts, and she tied her own hair back. I offered her the white ribbons, but she shook her head decisively and opted for the rubber band instead. I don't like those ribbons anymore, she said. I decided I didn't either and threw them away. Kai watched me do it and offered no objection. Then I crossed the living room to the wood stove. What are you doing? She finished her second glass of milk, wriggling off her chair, and came over to me. Making a fire. Maybe all those hot days thinned my blood. That's what my mom would have said anyway. She watched silently as I pulled sheet after sheet from the pile of paper I'd taken off the table and stacked on top of the wood stove. Balled each one up. Oh, I'd taken off the table and stacked on the wood stove. Balled each one up and slipped it through the door. When I felt I'd loaded enough, I began to lay bits of kindling on top. What's written on those papers? Kai asked. Nothing important. Is it a story? Not really. It's more like, I don't know, a crossword puzzle or a letter. Pretty long letter, she said, and then laid her head against my leg, as if she were tired. Yeah, I said. Love letters usually are, but keeping them around is a bad idea. Why? Because they can come back to haunt you, was what rose to mind. But I wouldn't say it, because they can embarrass you in later life. Oh, besides, I said, these papers are like your ribbons in a way. You don't like them anymore? Right. She saw the box then, the tin box with Joe's notions written on the front. It was on the counter between the living room and the sink, not far from where Old Crazy Cat had hung on the wall. I didn't remember bringing the box up from the studio with me, but I supposed I might not have. I was pretty freaked. I also think it could have come up kind of by itself. I do believe such things now. I had reason to. Kyra's eyes lit up in a way they hadn't since she had awakened from her short nap to find out her mother was dead. She stood on tiptoe to take hold of the box. They ran her small fingers across the gilt letters. I thought about how important it was for a kid to own a tin box. You had to have one for your own secret stuff. The best toy, the prettiest bit of lace, the first piece of jewelry, or a picture of your mother, perhaps. This is so pretty, she said in a soft, odd voice. You can have it if you don't mind it saying Joe's notions instead of Kai's notions. There's some papers in it I want to read, but I could put them somewhere else. She looked to me to make sure I wasn't kidding, saw I wasn't. I'd love it, she said in a same soft, odd voice. I took the box from her, scooped out the steno book's notes and clippings, and then handed it back to Kai. She practiced taking the lid off and putting it back on. Guess what I'll put in here, she said. Secret treasures? Yes, she said, and actually smiled for a moment. Who was Jo, Mike? I know her? I do, don't I? She was one of the refrigerator people? A thought occurred. I shuffled through the yellow clippings. Nothing. I thought I'd lost it somewhere along the way, then saw the corner of what I was looking for peeking from the middle of one of the steno books. I slid it out and handed it to Kai. What is it? A backwards photo. Hold it up to the light. She did, and looked for a long time, rapt. Faint as a dream, I could see my wife in her head. My wife standing on the swimming float in her two-piece suit. That's Jo, I said. She's pretty. I'm glad I have her box for my things. I am too, Kai. I kissed the top of her head. When Sheriff Ridgwick hammered on the door, I thought it wise to answer with my hands up. He looked wired. What seemed to ease the situation was a simple, uncalculated question. Where's Alan Pangborn these days, Sheriff? Over New Hampshire, Ridgwick said, lowering his pistol a little. A moment or two later, he holstered it, without even seeming to be aware he had done so. He and Polly are doing real well, except for her arthritis. That's nasty, I guess. But she still has her good days. A person can go along quite a while if they get a good day every once and again. That's what I think, Mr. Noonan. I have a lot of questions for you. You know that, don't you? Yes. First off, and most important, do you have the child, Kyra DeVore? I do. Yes. Where is she? I'm happy to show you. We walked down the north wing corridor and stood just outside the bedroom doorway, looking in. The duvet was pulled up to her chin, and she was sleeping deeply. The stuffed dog was curled in one hand. We could just see its muddy tail poking out of her fist at one end, and its nose poking out at the other. We stood there for a long time, neither of us saying anything, watching her sleep in the light of the summer evening. In the woods, the trees had stopped falling, but the wind still blew. Around the eaves of Sara Laughs, it made a sound like ancient music. Epilogue. It snowed for Christmas, a polite 6 inches of powder that made the carolers working the streets of Sanford look like they belonged in It's a Wonderful Life. By the time I came back from checking Kyra for the third time, it was 1:15 in the morning of the 26th, and the snow had stopped. A late moon, plump but pale, was peeking through the unraveling fluff of clouds. I was Christmasing with Frank again, and we were the last two up. The kids, Kai included, were dead to the world, sleeping off the annual bacchanal of food and presents. Frank was on his third scotch. It had been the third Scotch story, if there ever was one, I guess. But I'd barely drank the top off my first one. I think I must have gotten into the bottle quite heavily. If not for Kai. On the days when I had her, I usually don't drink so much as a glass of beer. And to have her 3 days in a row, but shit, Kimosabi, if you can't spend Christmas with your kid, What the hell is Christmas for? Are you all right? Frank asked, when I sat down again and took a little sip from my glass. I grinned at that. Not is she all right, but are you all right? Well, nobody ever asked Frank, and nobody ever said Frank was stupid. You should have seen me when the Department of Human Services let me have her for a weekend in October. I must have checked on her a dozen times before I went to bed, and then I kept checking, getting up and peeking in on her, listening to her breath. I didn't sleep a wink Friday night, caught maybe 3 hours on Saturday. So this is a big improvement. But if you ever blab any of what I've told you, Frank, if they ever hear about me filling up that bathtub before the storm knocked the genie out, I can kiss my chances of adopting her goodbye. I'll probably have to fill out a form in triplicate before they even let me attend her high school graduation. I hadn't meant to tell Frank the bathtub part, but once I started talking, almost everything spilled out. I suppose it had to spill to someone if I was ever to get on with my life. I'd assumed that John Sturrow would be the one on the other side of the confessional when the time came, but John didn't want to talk about any of those events except that they bore on our ongoing, except as they bore on our ongoing legal business, which nowadays is all about Kyra Elizabeth DeVore. I'll keep my mouth shut, don't worry. Here goes the adoption battle. Slow. How goes the adoption battle? Slow. I'll come to loathe the state of Maine court system and DHS as well. Or I've come. You take the people who work in these bureaucracies one by one, and they're mostly fine, but when you put them together, bad, huh? I sometimes feel like a character in Bleak House. That's the one where Dickens says that in court nobody wins but the lawyers. John tells me to be patient and count my blessings, but we're making amazing progress considering that I'm that most untrustworthy of creatures, an unmarried white male of middle age. Kai's been in 2 foster home situations since Maddie died, and doesn't she have kin in one of those neighboring towns? Maddie's aunt? She didn't want anything to do with Kai when Maddie was alive, and has even less interest now, especially since Kai's not going to be rich. Yeah. The Whitmore woman was lying about DeVore's will. Absolutely. He left everything to a foundation that's supposed to foster global computer literacy. With due respect to the number crunchers of the world, I can't imagine a colder charity. How's John? Pretty well mended, but he's never going to get the use of his right arm back entirely. He damn near died of blood loss. Frank had led me away from the entwined subjects of kind custody quite well for a man deep in his 3rd Scotch, but I was willing enough to go. I could hardly bear to think of her long days and long nights in those homes where the Department of Human Services stores away children like knickknacks nobody wants. Kai didn't want to live in those places, but only existed in them, pale and listless, like a well-fed rabbit kept in a cage. Each time she saw my car turning in or pulling up, she came alive, waving her arms and dancing like Snoopy on his doghouse. Our weekend in October had been wonderful, despite my obsessive need to check on her every half hour or so after she was asleep. And the Christmas holiday had been even better. Her emphatic, her emphatic desire to be with me was helping in court more than anything else. Yet the wheels still turned slowly. Maybe in the spring, Mike, John told me. He was a new John these days, pale and serious. The slightly arrogant, eager beaver who had wanted nothing more than to go head to head with Mr. Maxwell Big Bucks DeVore was no longer in evidence. John had learned something about morality on the 21st of July, and something about the world's idiot cruelty as well. The man who had taught himself to shake with his left hand instead of his right was no longer interested in partying till he puked. He was seeing a girl in Philly, the daughter of one of his mother's friends. I had no idea if it was serious or not. Kai's Uncle John was closed-mouthed about that part of his life. But when a young man is out on his own accord seeing a daughter of one of his mother's friends, it usually is. Maybe in the spring. Is that his mantra, that late fall, early winter? What am I doing wrong? I asked him once. This is just after Thanksgiving, and another setback. Nothing, he replied. Single-parent adoptions are always slow, and when the putative adopter is a man, it's worse. At that point in the conversation, John made an ugly little gesture, poking the index finger of his left hand in and out of his loosely cupped fist. That's blatant sex discrimination, John. Yeah, but usually it's justified. Blame it on every twisted asshole who ever decided he had the right to take off some little girl's pants, if you want. Blame it on the bureaucracy if you want. Hell, blame it on the cosmic rays if you want. It's a slow process, but you're going to win in the end. You've got a clean record. You got Kyra saying, I want to be with Mike, to every judge and DHS worker she sees. You've got enough money to keep after them no matter how much they squirm and no matter how many forms they throw at you. And most of all, buddy, you've got me. I had something else, too. What Kai had whispered in my ear as I paused to catch my breath on the steps. I'd never told John about that, and it was one of the few things I didn't tell Frank either. Maddie says I'm your little guy now, she had whispered. Maddie says you'll take care of me. I was trying to, as much as the fucking slowpokes in human services would let me, but the waiting was hard. Frank picked up the scotch and tilted it in my direction. I shook my head. Kai had her heart set on snowman making, and I wanted to be able to face the glare of early sun on fresh snow without a headache. Frank, how much of this do you actually believe? He poured for himself, then sat for a time, looking down at the table and thinking. When he raised his head again, there was a smile on his face. It was so much like Joe's that it broke my heart. And when he spoke, he juiced his ordinarily faint Boston grog. Sure. And I'm a half-drunk Irishman who's just finished listening to the granddaddy of all ghost stories on Christmas night, he said. I believe all of it, silly git. I laughed, and so did he. We did it mostly through the nose, as men are apt to do when up late, maybe in their cups a little, and don't want to take the house. Is anybody down here? Val? Can you bring him in, please? Come on, how much really? All of it, he repeated, dripping the grog. Because Joe believed it. And because of her. He nodded his head in the direction of the stairs, so I'd know which her he meant. She's like no other little girl I've ever seen. She's sweet enough, but there's something in her eyes. At first I thought it was losing her mother the way she did. But that's not it. There's more, isn't there? Yes, I said. It's in you, too. It's touched you both. I thought of the baying thing which Joe had managed to hold back while I poured the lie into the rotted roll of canvas. An outsider, she'd called it. I hadn't gotten a clear look at it, and probably that was good. Probably that was very good. Mike? Frank looked concerned. You're shivering. Oh, I'm okay, I said. Really? What's it like in the house now? He asked. Are you two done? I was living in Sara Laughs. I procrastinated until early November, then put the dairy house up for sale. Quiet. Totally quiet? I nodded, and that wasn't completely true. On a couple occasions, I was awakened with the sensation Maddie had once mentioned, that there was someone in bed with me, but not a dangerous presence. Only a couple occasions I had smelled or thought I have. On a couple of occasions I have smelled or thought I have red perfume. And sometimes Even when the air is perfectly still, Bunter's bell is shivering out a few notes. It's as if something lonely wants to say hello. Frank glanced at the clock, then back at me, almost apologetically. I've got a few more questions, okay? If you can stay up until the wee hours on Boxing Day morning, I said. I guess you never can. Fire away. What did you tell the police? I didn't have to tell them much of anything. Footman talked enough to suit them. Too much to suit Norris Ridgwick. Footman said that he and Osgood, it was Osgood driving the car, Devore's pet broker, did the drive-by because Devore had made threats about what would happen if they didn't. The state police also found a copy of the wire transfer among Devore's effects at Warrington's. $2 million to an account in the Grand Caymans. The name scribbled on the copy of Randolph is Randolph Footman. Randolph is George's middle name. Mr. Footman is now residing in Shawshank State Prison. What about Roget? Well, Whitmore was her mother's maiden name, but I think it's safe to say that Roget's heart belonged to Daddy. She had leukemia, was diagnosed in 1996, and people her age, she was only 57 when she died, by the way. It's fatal in 2 cases out of every 3, but she was doing the chemo, hence the wig. Why did she try to kill Kyra? I don't understand that. If you broke Sarah Tidwell's hold on the earthly plane of ours, when you dissolved her bones, the curse should have. Why are you looking at me that way? You'd understand if you ever met Devore, I said. This is a man who lit the fucking TR on fire as a way of saying goodbye when he headed west to sunny California. I thought of him the second I pulled the wig off. I thought they'd swapped identities somehow. And then I thought, oh no, it's her all right. It's Roget. She's just lost her hair somehow. And you were right, the chemo. I was also wrong. I know more about ghosts than I did, Frank. Maybe the most important thing is that what you see first, what you think first, that's what's usually true. It was him that day, Devore. He had come back at the end, I'm sure of it. At the end, it wasn't about Sarah, not for him. At the end, it wasn't even about Kyra. At the end, it was about Scooter Larrabee's sled. Silence between us. For a few moments, it was so deep that I could actually hear the house breathing. You can hear that, you know. If you really listen, there's something else I know now. At last, I don't think Devore came east from California to kill her, I said. Oh, I don't think Devore came east from California to kill her, I said. That wasn't the original plan. Then what was? Get to know his granddaughter? Mend his fences? God, no. You still don't understand what he was? Tell me then. A human monster. He came back to buy her. But Maddie wouldn't sell. Then, when Sarah got hold of him, he began to plan Kai's death. I suspect that Sarah never found a more willing tool. How many did she kill in all? Frank asked. I don't know for sure. I don't think I want to, based on Joe's notes and clippings. I'd say there were perhaps 4 other direct murders, shall we call them, in the years between 1901 and 1998. All children, all cane names, all closely related to the men who killed her. My God. I don't think God had much to do with it, but she made them pay, all right. You're sorry for her, aren't you? Yes. I would have torn her apart before I let her put so much as a finger on Kai, but of course, I am. She was raped and murdered. Her child was drowned while she herself lay dying. My God, aren't you sorry for her? My God, aren't you sorry for her? I suppose I am, Mike. I suppose I am. Mike, do you know who the other boy was? The crying boy? Was he the one who died of blood poisoning? Most of Joe's notes concerned that part of it. It's where she got started. Royce Merrill knew the story well. The crying boy was Reg Tidwell, Jr. You have to understand that by September of 1901, when the Red Tops played their last show in Castle County, almost everyone on the TR knew that Sara and her boy had been murdered, and almost everyone had good idea of who'd done it. Reg Tidwell spent a lot of that August hounding the county sheriff, Nehemiah Bannerman. At first, it was to find them alive. Tidwell wanted a search mounted. Then it was to find their bodies, and then it was to find their killers. Because once he accepted that they were dead, he never doubted that they'd been murdered. Bannerman was sympathetic at first. Everyone seemed sympathetic at first. The Red Tops crowd had been treated wonderfully during their time on the TR. That was what infuriated Jared the most. And I think you can forgive son Tidwell for making a crucial mistake. What mistake was that? Why, he got the idea that Mars was heaven, I thought. The TR must have seemed like heaven to them. Right up until Sara and Keto went for a stroll, the boy carrying his berry bucket, and never came back. It must have seemed that they'd finally found a place where they could be black people and still be allowed to breathe. Thinking they'd be treated like regular folks when things went wrong, just because they'd been treated that way when things were right. Instead, the TR clubbed together against them. No one who had an idea of what Jared and his protégés had done condoned it exactly, but when the chips were down, you protect your own, you wash your dirty laundry with the door closed, Frank murmured and finished his drink. Yeah, by the time the Red Tops closed the Castle County Fair, their little community down by the lake had begun to break up. This is all according to Joe's notes. You understand? What? Okay, I got it. This is all according to Joe's notes, you understand. There's not a whisper of it in any of the town histories. By Labor Day, the act of harassment had started, so Royce told Joe. It was a little... Yes, I'm reading. I'm doing the epilogue now. By Labor Day, the act of harassment had started, so Royce told Joe. It got a little uglier every day, a little scarier, but son Tidwell flat didn't want to go, not until he found out what had happened to his sister and nephew. Yes. Housework. He's like, you're always reading. Yes, I'm always reading. If I'm not reading for you guys, I'm reading something else. I listen to videos on YouTube. I play a few games on Facebook, and I read. Sometimes I write. I really need to get back into doing my rosaries and stuff, but they haven't been selling, so. All right. It got a little uglier every day, a little scarier, but son Tidwell flat didn't want to go not until he found out what had happened to his sister and nephew. He'd apparently kept the Blood family there in the meadow, even after the others had taken off for friendlier locations. Then someone laid the trap. There was a clearing in the woods about a mile east of what's now called Tidwell's Meadow. It had a big birch cross in the middle of it. Joe had a picture of it in her studio. 4:00? 4:15? Okay. All right. That was where the black community had their services after the doors of the local churches were closed to them. The boy, Junior, used to go up there a lot to pray or just to sit and meditate. There was plenty of folks in the township who knew his routine. Someone just a Someone put a leg hold trap in the little path through the woods that the boy used, covered it with leaves and needles. Jesus, Frank said. He sounded ill. Probably it wasn't Jared DeVore and his logger boys who said it either. They didn't want any more to do with Sara and Son's people after the murders. They kept right clear of them. It might not even have been a friend of those boys. By then, they didn't have that many friends. But that didn't change the fact that those folks down by the lake were getting out of their place, scratching at things better left alone, refusing to take no for an answer. I can't write. But that didn't change the fact that those folks down by the lake were getting out of place, scratching at things better left alone, and refusing to take no for an answer. Oh, sorry about that. So someone set the trap. I don't think there was any intent to actually kill the boy, but to maim him. Maybe see him with his foot off, condemned to a lifetime crutch. I think they may have gotten that far in their imagining. In any case, it worked. The boy stepped in the trap, and for quite a while they didn't find him. The pain must have been excruciating. Then the blood poisoning. He died. Son gave up. He had other kids to think about, not to mention the people who'd stuck with him. They packed up their clothes and their guitars and left. Joe traced some of them to North Carolina, where many of the descendants still live. And during the fires of 33, the ones young Max DeVore set, the cabins burned flat. Oh, you are. You just don't want to admit it. I don't understand why the bodies of Sara and her sons weren't found. Sara and her son weren't found, Frank said. I understand what you smelled, the putrescence. Wasn't there in any physical sense? It wasn't there in any physical sense. But surely at the time, if this path you call the street was so popular, DeVore and the others didn't bury them where I found them, not to begin with. They would have started by digging the bodies deeper into the woods, maybe up to where the north wing of Sara Laughs stands now. They covered them with brush and came back that night, must have been that night. To leave them any longer would have drawn every carnivore in the woods. They took them someplace else and buried them in that roll of canvas. Joe didn't know where, but my guess is Bowie Ridge, where they'd spend most of the summer cutting. Hell, Bowie Ridge is still pretty isolated. They put the bodies somewhere, we might as well say there. Then how? Why? Draper Finney wasn't the only one haunted by what they did. Frank, they all were. Literally haunted. Frank, they all were. Literally haunted. With the possible exception of Jared DeVore, I suppose. He lived another 10 years and apparently never missed a meal. But the boys had bad dreams. They drank too much. They fought too much. They argued. Bristled if anyone so much as mentioned the red tops. Might as well have gone around wearing signs reading, "Kick us, we're guilty," Frank commented. Yes, it probably didn't help that most of the TR was giving them the silent treatment. Then Finney died in the quarry, committed suicide in the quarry, I think, and Jared's logger boys got an idea, came down with it like a cold, only it was more like compulsion. Their idea was that if they dug up the bodies and reburied them where it happened, things would go back to normal for them. Did Jared go along with the idea? According to Joe's notes, by then they never went near him. They reburied the bag of bones without Jared DeVore's help, where I eventually dug it up in the late fall, early winter of 1902, I think. She wanted to be back, didn't she, Sara? Back where she could really work on them? And on the whole township, yes. Joe thought so too. Enough so she didn't want to go back to Sara Laughs once she found some of this stuff out, especially when she guessed she was pregnant. When we started trying to have a baby and I suggested the name Kaya, how that must have scared her. And I never saw. What the hell was that? Okay. Sara thought she could use you to kill Kyra if DeVore played out before she could get the job done. He was old and in bad health, after all. Joe gambled that you'd save her instead. That's what you think, isn't it? Yes. She was right. I couldn't have done it alone. From the night I dreamed about Sara singing, Joe was with me every step of the way. Sara couldn't make her quit. No, she wasn't a quitter, Frank agreed, and wiped at one eye. What do you know about your twice great aunt, the one that married Oster? Bridget Noonan Oster, I said. Briddy, to her friends. I asked my mother, and she swears up and down she knows nothing. That Joe never asked her about Briddy. But I think she might be lying. The young woman was definitely the black sheep of the family. I can tell just by the sound of Mom's voice when the name comes up. I have no idea how she met Benton Oster. Let's say she was down in the Prout's Neck part of the world visiting friends and starts flirting with her. He starts flirting with her. Okay, let's say he's down at the Prout's Neck part of the world visiting friends and started flirting with her at the clam bake. That's as likely as anything else. This was 1884. She was 18. He was 23. They got married. One of those hurry-up jobs. Harry, the one who actually drowned Keto Tidwell, came along 6 months later. So, he was barely 17 when it happened, Frank said. Great God. And by then, his mother had gotten religion. His terror over what she'd think if she ever found out was part of the reason he did what he did. Any other questions, Frank? Because I'm really starting to fade. For several moments, he said nothing. I had begun to think he was done when he said, 2 others, do you mind? I guess it's too late to back out now. What are they? The shape you spoke of, the outsider? That troubles me. I said nothing. It troubled me, too. Do you think there's a chance it might come back? It always does, I said. At the risk of sounding pompous, the outsider eventually comes back for all of us, doesn't it? Because we're all bag of bones. And the outsider, Frank? The outsider wants what's in the bag. He mulled this over and swallowed the rest of his scotch in a gulp. You had one other question? Yes. Have you started writing again? I went upstairs a few minutes later, checked Kai, brushed my teeth, checked Kai again, and climbed into bed. From where I lay, I was able to look out the window at the pale moon shining on the snow. Have you started writing again? No. Other than a rather lengthy essay on how I spent my summer vacation, which I may show to Kyra in some later year, there's been nothing. I know that Harold is nervous, and sooner or later I suppose I'll Have to call him and tell him that what he already guesses. The machine which ran so sweet for so long has stopped. It's just broken. That memoir came out with nary a gasp or missed heartbeat, but the machine just stopped, just the same. There's gas in the tank, the spark plugs, and the battery bats, but the word Gertie stands there quiet in the middle of my head. The word Gertie, okay? I put a tarp over it. It's served me well, you see, and I don't like to think of it getting dusty. Some of it has to do with the way Maddie died. It occurred to me at some point this fall that I had written similar deaths in at least 2 of my books, and popular fiction is heaped with other examples of the same thing. Have you set up a moral dilemma you don't know how to solve? Is the protagonist sexually attracted to a woman who is too young for him, shall we say? Need a quick fix? Easiest thing in the world. And the story starts going sour. Bring on the man with the gun. Raymond Chandler had said that, or something like it, close enough for government work. Kimosabi. Murder is the worst kind of pornography. Murder is let me do what I want, taken to its final extreme. I believe that even make-believe murders should be taken seriously. Maybe that's another idea I got last summer. Perhaps I got it while Maddie was struggling in my arms, gushing blood from her smashed head and dying blind, still crying out for her daughter as she left this earth. To think I might have written such a hellishly convenient death in a book ever sickens me. Or maybe I just wish there had been a little more time. It's best not to leave around. But I thought, leave love letters around. What I thought but didn't say was that they can come back to haunt you. I am haunted anyway, but I will not willingly haunt myself. And when I closed my book of dreams, I did so of my own free will. I think I could have poured lie over those dreams as well, but from that I stayed my hand. I've seen things I never expected to see, and felt things I never expected to feel. Not the least of them what I felt and still feel for the child sleeping down the hall from me. She's my little guy now. I'm her big guy, and that's the important thing. Nothing else seems to matter half as much. Thomas Hardy, who supposedly said that the most brilliantly drawn character in a novel is but a bag of bones, stopped writing novels himself after finishing Jude the Obscure. And while he was at the height of his narrative genius, he went on writing poetry for another 20 years. And when someone asked him why he'd quit fiction, he said he couldn't understand why he had trucked with it so long in the first place. In retrospect, it seemed silly to him, he said, pointless. I know exactly what he meant. In the time between now and whenever the outsider remembers me and decides to come back, there must be other things to do. Things that mean more than those shadows. I think I could go back to clanking chains behind the ghost house wall, but I have no interest in doing so. I've lost my taste for spooks. I like to imagine Maddie would think of Bartleby in Melville's story. I put down my scrivener's pen. These days I prefer not to. Central Level, Maine, May 25th, 1997, February 6th, 1998. was such a good book. I really didn't think today would be longer than yesterday. And I even took some time yesterday, like 10 minutes. And I've been reading for almost 3 hours straight, minus 5 minutes. And a few interruptions. But that, now I understand what the Bag of Bones is. Ooh. That was a heavy one. That was a very heavy one. What do you guys think? I think we did well. We handled it well. So hopefully things are good. I shall see you guys soon. I am going to go as long as my live doesn't kick me off. Thank you for sticking with me through Bag of Bones. Thank you for listening to me and my little mess ups. I appreciate it. I love you all. I shall see you again soon. I'm going to take a day and maybe 2, and I'm going to just rest my voice. I love you all. Thank you. You have a good day. And think over Bag of Bones. And I will leave the link to my Discord. I will change out one of my... Yeah, I'll figure out something. But I'm going to leave you guys my Discord again. All right? Thanks, guys. Love you. Bye. Have a good day.